Karen alert! I survived the most nightmare customer of my life. I worked in Domino's. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30-odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, "Oh, my money's not good enough for you? Fine. I'll never order Domino's again." I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. I love when the "I'll never come back" threat comes out. Like, you think my salary is at all affected by you not coming in? Please never come back. It's one less person to yell at me. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Amaro from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. Barista here. Had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look, he'd say, "Well, how else am I going to taste you?" Yeah, he was the worst. Oh my god, I had a similar guy when I was in college. He said for me to stick my finger into the beer bottle so he could taste something sweet. Ugh. Worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait time, like 30 to 40-minute waits, during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady that got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people, and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now, and I'd like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." I was completely mind-blown how people are able to not give an F and pull something like this in public. This one guy threw a beer in my face when I stuck up for myself by telling him to stop banging his fists on the bar and screaming, "Yo!" to get my attention. I had a guy literally spit on me for the same reason. I was working at one of the busiest bars in a major city in the Midwest, and this F-stick couldn't stop pounding his empty glass on the bar, rolling his eyes and yelling, "I'm empty over here." It was 11 on a Saturday night and the bar was packed. Literally a line around the block. I told him I'd get to him as quickly as I could, and not 20 seconds later, I hear him slamming one of my frickin' glasses on the bar again. I lean over the bar to tell him if he can't stop bashing my glassware, I'm going to give him a plastic cup. The D-bag proceeds to spit in my frickin' face. I was honestly shocked. One of my regulars grabbed him by the back of his head and slammed his face into the bar. Fight breaks out, and at least 20 of my glasses ended up broken. Ugh. Well, I don't condone violence, but I'm not at all sorry that the guy had his mug impact the bar with prejudice, because that's a classic story of F around and find out. What a dillweed. Way back in the 80s, I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. I've never seen a bigger butthead than that guy. Literally made our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation for being a jerk off camera as well. Eventually, he was disgraced by being outed as an unspeakable act offender of the worst kind and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. One guy would come into the cafe with his 2 crappy dogs that would hop on everything and bark at people. Even if there was a line, he'd just raise his hand and yell, "Coffee!" and just walk past the line and wait for his coffee, where he'd pay cash at the pickup area. One day, after he skipped a particularly long line, I refused to make his coffee for him. He started shouting at me and saying he'd get me fired, but eventually he went to the end of the line and had to order his coffee like everyone else. Nobody clapped, but I felt like the people in line were clapping in their hearts. Our bar was having a private party. Drunk guy walks in and orders a drink. I knew he wasn't with the party based on his attire and the fact that he came in every so often. I told him he couldn't get a drink, and he lost his mind. He told me to F off, and then he wanted to fight me. On his way out, he yelled that we should put up signs as he walked by the signs on the door saying that we were closed for a private event. He came in the next day sober and apologized. I work in a place that's frequented by local families and youth sports teams. I'm not a server, I'm a cook who happens to take orders, pour beer, run food, clear tables, and do dishes. But primarily, I cook. On Sundays, this one large group of people always comes in, and they are the worst. The parents drink and ignore their preteens who run around playing games in the entire restaurant, disrupting everybody else. They've tried to walk in parties of 45 during end-of-year sports party season when we're booked solid, and then get angry that there isn't enough space for them. And they modify everything like crazy and leave 0 in tips. It's at least once a month the entire group comes in, and weekly for some of the individual families. After a wedding reception ended at our facility, we were cleaning and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was almost over, a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy a guest's needs, but the machine was cleaning and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding and stormed out to our banquets manager and told them that I refused to make it for him. The manager is a D-bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine has just finished the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand, and I got suspended for 2 weeks. Used to be a bartender at this hybrid restaurant-bar-movie theater. On big movie releases, the bar would get absolutely slammed, and on this particular night we'd run out of glassware completely. People were allowed to take their drinks into the theater with them. The only glassware I had at the time were regular pint glasses that you'd normally serve water in. We only served beer in them in a real pinch. This one guy and his wife got lucky and caught a seat at the bar, and he ordered a Jack Daniel's neat. Having no other glassware, I put it in a pint glass and explained that we were running low on rocks glasses. Assuming that he'd understand since it was absolute chaos everywhere you looked. He took it and said, "I'm not very happy," in a smarmy way and gave this little crap-eating grin. I apologized him and said, "Well, unfortunately we're not making any more glasses back here." And he and his wife acted like I'd reached across the bar and slapped him. I just got my manager and told him to deal with them, and he told them the same thing I'd told them regarding the lack of glassware, and gave them a free drink which they seemed happy with. I would have felt bad if there was something else I could have done for them, but there wasn't, so screw that guy. I mean, he said I'm not very happy and he smiled. He wanted a free drink and unfortunately he got it. A lady from the real estate agency next door ordered a chicken box and then proceeded to drive an hour to her next showing, in the middle of summer, where it probably sat right in front of her AC unit in the passenger seat. Surprise, surprise, the food gets cold when left in the cold. Who knew? Upon the shocking discovery that the food doesn't stay warm, she called us to scream at my boss that we tried to kill her. Because he's a spineless pushover in the summer, he agreed to give her a new free meal when she came back. She came to get her free food and things didn't improve. One of our chefs came to collect her cold food. While still in front of the window, he opened the box and fished out the uneaten biscuit. He threw the rest away but walked away with the bread. I presume he meant to eat it, but he went about it all wrong. She started screaming about how we were recycling food and that she was good friends with the health inspector and that she was going to see us in court. The histrionics brought my boss out of his office, and after chewing out the idiot chef, he tried to smooth things over. I don't remember much, we were busy as fudge, and since he'd taken over the drive-thru, I hopped onto another task. She would not move forward and the line was piling up. My boss was starting to get annoyed. They'd stopped talking to each other. Her hot, fresh meal was up and he goes to hand deliver it and tell her to get the F out of line. I'm not entirely sure as I was halfway across the store trying to make drinks. All I remember is the surprised gasp from our food runner and looking up to see a box of steaming hot chicken sailing through the window and scattering across the front of house. My boss had barely stepped back in time. We could only stare as the crazy lady roared out of the parking lot, and he snapped at the first person stupid enough to still be making eye contact to clean it up. Fast food near a high school about a decade ago. The absolute worst were the mums. We had one who came in weekly and screamed about wrong orders or whatever complaints she could dream up so she could get her free food for her entire family. Then you get the loser D-bags who think giving the staff a hard time is funny. And the absolute worst customer was the owner of the franchise. He'd walk in, test employees, and then fire someone for some issue so minor it was likely just made up. I'm sure that one still happens in some places occasionally, but I don't think people are as likely to casually fire staff in low-paying jobs in the US now, given how much of a shortage most places seem to have. Silver lining, I guess. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago. There was a private party and one of the guests asked me to plug in his phone to listen to a song. No big deal, I did it and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and then got wasted. When he was leaving, I said, "Sir, don't forget about your phone," and he threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the F alone and told me to get a real job. So guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? We had someone do a runner once and they left their phone. Reasonably expensive one, although this was over 15 years ago, so I can't remember if they were as much as they are now. He sheepishly came back the next day asking if one had been handed in. Our boss said no and kept the phone. We had that happen all the time too. When the jerk would come back the next day looking for their phone, the manager would say, "Hold on, let me go check the office." In the meantime, you can close out your $100 tab from last night too. If the guy paid the $100, he'd get his phone. If he refused to pay, the phone was never found. Not exactly doing God's work, but at least it was some consolation for dealing with rude, drunk buttholes who disrespect the employees of the bar. I had a guy that was a germaphobe and had really bad OCD. He came through before, and my coworker just didn't want to deal with him. So I went to the drive-thru window after washing my hands. I cashed out the order that was on the screen, and he reluctantly handed over his card. I gave him the coffee that I'd cashed him out for. He started yelling at me, saying that it was wrong. Apparently, the person that took the order forgot to type it in, which is unfortunate, but it happens. He started yelling at the coworker that didn't want to take his order at the window. So instead of just saying that it was the wrong order, getting refunded and being on his way, he stayed in the driveway for 20 minutes telling my coworker that she was stupid and unprofessional and was unfit to be a supervisor. He kept demanding that we get the phone number of our franchise owner, but apparently the number was wrong and he kept yelling at us. But when he came back to the window after 20 minutes of this, he left. My supervisor went into the back to cry. I felt so bad for her. She's a sweet person. Fast forward to less than a month later, he called the store to apologize, and the manager made sure that my coworker never dealt with him again, but that he could come in as long as he didn't make a scene. He then told the manager that his therapist told him he should apologize, and then spent a combined total of 3 hours on the phone with the manager, where he apologized and also blamed us for making him late to his appointment that day, and at the end of the phone call, he asked if we were hiring. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I worked at a bakery for 2 years and I had to deal with honestly the most heinous and rude customers ever. I've worked in the food service industry my whole life and lived in Toronto up until about 3 years ago, and I've never dealt with such entitlement. Anyways, one day one of our staff members quit by text message 5 minutes before her shift and 30 minutes before we were set to open at 8 AM on a Saturday. We were hard-pressed finding somebody to cover, so I was alone until a front-of-house person was able to come in about an hour later. I had one of the kitchen staff helping me, and all they could do was grab things and bag them, as they weren't trained on cash or coffee. So there I was, running around, trying to help customers, make coffees, ring people through, and clearly very stressed. This D-bag man was also clearly annoyed that he had to wait, and was huffing and puffing, and eventually exclaimed, "F this, I'm not effing waiting for this crap," and proceeds to throw his bagged muffin at my head and storm out. I legitimately almost chased him down. I was livid. Customers are bull. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it, so instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. I used to manage a restaurant and I hated those couple of times in my 5 years of working there when some entitled customer left without paying because, well, the waitress didn't come to pick up my money. That's a piece of crap move and a poor excuse, when all you need to do is grab a waitress's attention by simply talking. Once it was a family of 4 who left the restaurant during a busy evening, and we realized that the bill wasn't paid after some 10 minutes had passed. I checked the cameras and saw the father taking the bill, putting the money in, sitting there for about 3 or 4 minutes looking around, and then taking the money back and leaving with the whole family. Luckily, our owner was a great guy and told me to simply ban the F word in his family, and to my surprise, that piece of crap came back with friends on a busy evening in a couple of months. I was very excited watching his face being embarrassed in front of his friends and customers sitting outside when I told him he was banned, and when his wife started to get upset, I told them I remembered them and told them the whole story with me checking the cameras and seeing him take the money back and everything. Had a man and his wife come in during a really busy lunch rush. He was rude off the bat, interrupting me, not wanting to listen to me speak, whatever, that happens all the time. He was very adamant that he wanted both chips and salsa and a plate of roasted wings as appetizers. He kept emphasizing that he wanted them together before they ordered their lunch, even though chips and salsa only take a minute and wings take about 12. I rang them in together because of how he ordered them. In hindsight, I should have made completely sure, but you know. Not 3 minutes later, the man is waving at my coworker across the restaurant, yelling at her about how they've been there for 30 minutes and his appetizer is taking too long and he wants it before his wings. I was at a party table, so she ran back and grabbed the chips and the wings, which were somehow up as well, and brought them out. He took one bite of a wing and tossed the plate like a frisbee across the table towards her and started complaining about them being cold. I rushed over to see what was going on, and he starts yelling at me, saying his food is awful and this is the worst service he's ever gotten in his life. I don't do well with grown men yelling at me, so I went to the kitchen and my manager went out and thankfully had my back as much as he could, and made the guy pay for the wings and chips and then leave. After he left, I started to clean the table, where I found the single penny he'd tipped me with, that my coworker promptly threw in the trash, and got a call from my general manager asking why a man had called me professionally challenged on Yelp. Okay, well, that's at least an insult that I haven't heard before, so we have to give him points for being original. Extrapolating a 3-minute wait into a 30-minute one is either delusional or this guy was angling for a free meal, so don't beat yourself up. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant back in high school, and I had a Viet family come in to eat. They gave me a snobby vibe the entire time, especially after I told them I couldn't speak Vietnamese. They ordered a regular pho, but asked for no cilantro. So I rang the order in with no cilantro, and it came out with cilantro on it anyway, and I told the kitchen what the family asked. The kitchen told me they couldn't do anything about it, so I told my manager, and they told me to ask the family if they still wanted it. Family said yes, so I bought it out and they took out the cilantro and ate the entire thing. At the end of the meal, they spoke to the owner and complained about how I got their order completely wrong. They got the food for free and got their bill taken out of my pay. The owner told me I should have removed the cilantro myself. Crappy management, crappy customer. Any table that mentioned the tip at all. Oh, don't worry, we tip well. Or, if you do X, we'll tip big. We'll take care of you. Holding the tip over my head doesn't get you better service, you get the same everyone else does. They were always pretentious and rude, and they never tipped well in the end. My friend works at a restaurant. A vlogger was shooting a video, and since it was allowed within the place, nobody troubled her. Apparently, she wanted something very particular for her clickbait thumbnails, so she asked my friend to place his face in her cleave while she squirted ketchup on herself. My friend refused as he was in a relationship, but some other employee agreed to do so. After they shot the thumbnail, she marched in the next day claiming that they'd done so against her will. I don't know what happened after that, but it did not turn out well for the liar. This old guy who asked if I was included in the order. I'm 17. This happened to me when I was about that age. Some guy asked if I was on the dessert menu. I pretended so hard not to understand him that he actually got embarrassed, left a generous tip, and politely left without another word. I worked fast food in high school, and I've got a few. 1. A man orders a double cheeseburger with extra cheese and receives one with 4 slices instead of the usual 2. 2 minutes later, he's absolutely red in the face and screaming at the poor cashier. He's demanding to talk to the little turd that made his sandwich and asking if we think this is some kind of joke. Apparently, when he ordered extra cheese, he wanted 1 extra slice, not 2. Then some guy comes to the drive-thru and orders 4 fish sandwiches. We only had 2 pieces of fish cooked, and they were really close to their hold expiration time. Since we had to cook more anyway, my manager said to waste those 2 since they were old and make all fresh ones for the customer. The guy comes up to the window and they ask him to pull forward because it'll be a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, we keep serving other cars. After a couple of orders go out, this guy is in the lobby and asking for a manager. He's irate that we made him wait for his food while serving other people. The manager apologizes and explains the situation. Most people would be thrilled that we didn't serve them old food, but for some reason that just made this guy angrier. He starts yelling louder and then threatens my manager with physical violence over it. She asks him to leave and threatens to call the police. The guy storms out, slamming the door so hard that he broke the latch, and squeals his tires as he leaves the parking lot, without his order. And he never came back for it or his money either. And finally, we had this regular who came in every Sunday morning and ordered the same thing. A side salad, supersized fries, and a Happy Meal for her grandkid. One day, the person who bagged her order put the salad and the fries in the same bag as they were trained to do. If you've never seen a supersized fry container, they're tall. And the side salad is one of those little rectangular plastic things. So as you can imagine, the fries fell over. For a normal person, this is no big deal. But not for this lady. She needed new fries and a new salad in separate bags this time. Of course, the fries we'd already made that came up 1 minute ago were not good enough, and she refused to leave or accept the new ones until we made a fresh basket. Ugh. I waited tables for a few years in college, and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy he was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal, he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out, stiffing me not just on the tip, but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple of weeks later, the same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. Pizza, ice cream, sandwich shop in a small rural town. I was on delivery. We had this guy who ordered maybe once a week or so. This guy lived a solid half an hour outside of town. None of us knew why the owner ever agreed to deliver to this guy in the first place, being that far out, but we used to wonder if the owner was being threatened into it. The level of crap this customer would raise if you didn't bring him cheese and peppers for his pizza was absolute madness. There was an incident where a delivery driver found the customer waiting on his porch polishing a shotty, and the first thing the customer did was loosely point the weapon towards the driver and say, "Did you bring my cheese and peppers?" We fully believed the guy would have shot our driver if the answer had been no. As it was, the driver didn't have as much cheese and pepper as the customer would have liked. The customer called the restaurant and threw a fit. From then on, when we delivered to this customer, because the owner didn't cut him off, we were told to take a bucket of cheese and peppers with us. I'm talking like one of those bulk ice cream buckets you buy at the supermarket. We all kept it in our trucks, but we had to start taking an extra just for this one customer. I wonder if the guy was even in it for the pizza. Gentlemen, what's the biggest "I'm a princess" red flag? "I don't like cheap stuff" is always a dead giveaway. Also, mothers and sometimes fathers, depending on things. If your girl is BFFs with her mum, she'll end up like her in 20 years. It's like a freaking time capsule sometimes. My bro's wife is like this. The worst sign is when she's BFFs with her crazy witch mother, but only when they're apart. If they can't stand each other and argue all the time when they're together, but talk on the phone constantly when they're apart, run, mother fricker. This B-word is crazy. "Oh, you can take it, you're a guy." My best friend's ex would literally shove him around without even warning him to vent her unrelated bad mood, would be annoyed with his protests because she was significantly smaller than him and "men can take it." Didn't change the fact that shoving someone into a wall or a chair literally just because you feel like it is as straightforward abusive as you can get. The entitlement of it all. Lack of awareness of the plight of the proletariat and the subjugation of archaic feudal hierarchies. Come and see the violence inherent in the system. And now, a flag I had never even considered or encountered, and that is apparently a very common one. I'm a woman, but I've noticed women who are obsessed with Marilyn Monroe are usually terrible in a variety of ways. Frick. This hits hard. I dated a girl for a while in high school. She was fun, had a great sense of humor, and she was absolutely gorgeous. It was high school, and crap happens. We broke up after a little less than a year. Fast forward to 22-year-old me at Walmart in the middle of the night buying bullcrap snacks after work, and who do I see in line? Awesome girl from high school. She's with some guy who I assume is her boyfriend. We talk a little in line and I head home. By the time I get home, I have a text that just says, "He's not my boyfriend, by the way." And that's when I knew that I should pursue this again. We went on our first date and it was just like high school. She was still amazing and I realized that my feelings for her seemed as if they hadn't dulled in the slightest. Everything seemed perfect. I learned that 1, she had gotten her nips pierced, and so I didn't really focus on number 2, which was that she had a portrait of Marilyn Monroe tattooed on her waist with a dermal piercing for the beauty mark. I thought, that's weird, but those are great. Little did I know that there was a pot of crazy brewing underneath all of it. We dated for less than 2 months when she told me that she didn't want to be together anymore. I was upset, but after talking about our relationship and our feelings, I told her that I understood. A couple of days later, I get a phone call. She is teed off, screaming at me about how much I hurt her. I'm confused, to say the least. She tells me that breaking up with me was a test. I was supposed to fight for her. She wanted to see if we were meant for each other. Needless to say, I blocked her phone number and haven't looked back since. Mail here. Ex loved Marilyn. Ditched me for some guy who made more money. Apartment building caught on fire. She stole a Marilyn Monroe painting from the apartment next to ours and half my insurance check. She wouldn't sign off on it unless I gave her half. Happened days after she took all of her crap and moved out. Yes, I fought and did my homework. No win situation. She even went on to stop responding to me when I had $1,000 worth of checks I needed her to sign for my expense reimbursement. The insurance company got to keep the money. I had a brief phase where I felt I related to her and people called me Marilyn. Can confirm, I was a mess at the time. Over the winter, I worked with a girl who would say to everyone, "Girls hate me because I'm cute and I steal their boyfriends." I tried to avoid her after that. Girls hate you because you're a B-word. When her mother says, "Boys just flock around her like bees around honey," she agrees with a big smile. Respect for her brother responding with, "You mean like flies around crap?" My wife's maiden name was King. She maintains that she is a princess by definition. Can't argue with her logic. Based on your working, I assume that she changed her name when she married you. By that logic, you could argue that she abdicated. I was dating this girl that absolutely loved KFC's fried chicken. While she was in the shower one time, I decided to run to KFC and surprise her with a quick little meal. I did not get mashed potatoes, never really cared for their take on mashed taters. She threw me out upon finding there were no mashed potatoes. Threw me out. Talks about how much she hates the $200 marble iPhone case her mum bought her. Constantly calls her brand new MacBook Pro a piece of crap because she doesn't know how to use it, then proceeds to throw it to the ground and drop it all the time. Breaks the $200 marble iPhone case. Excited when mum buys her a new one. Yeah, I didn't stick around. Girls are too much drama, that's why I only have guy friends. I hate drama, princess who proceeds to cause all sorts of drama. I think it's a fairly good, if not universal indicator that if any person, male or female, tends to push away their friends, they may not be great at relationships either. Refusing to do something on the grounds that she's too good for it. Not taking out the garbage, cleaning a bathtub, whatever. Nobody's too good to be humble and helpful. Anybody who thinks they are is a butthole. A girl that was in my friends group got really angry when I talked about potentially moving houses, and I said that I would ask everyone, including her, for some help. Pizzas and beer guaranteed, of course. She went bat-crap crazy about how girls do not do these kinds of things, and it's rude to even think about asking her. The other girls were livid, referring to herself as a princess, or, "I can really be a diva, but cutesy smirk, gotta love me." No, I do not. The only time "gotta love me" is acceptable for anyone to say is if they're a pink baby dinosaur. After going out a few times, she said, "Man, I've gone so overboard spending lately. Hey, can you take care of my credit card debt for me?" Me, silent, looking at her oddly, trying to decide if this is a bad joke. "I mean, you could be a sugar daddy, couldn't you?" Me, "No, I'm not that old yet, nor wealthy, and I wouldn't be even if I were." "You don't want to be my sugar daddy?" That was the end of that relationship. I could maybe be your aspartame daddy, that's about it. I prefer the term Splendor Daddy. This happened to me, went out once, worst date ever. Ended the night without even a handshake. Made no plans. She texted me to ask to borrow $500 a couple of times. One of my best friends had a girlfriend once say she likes to have nicer things than other people, but doesn't want to work, so he needs to have a good job. Same girl also said she should come before family and God. I'm not religious, but that's still pretty nuts for people who are, which they were. Throwing a tantrum and being teed off at your boyfriend for not proposing the right way. Knew a girl who did this exact thing. We have a tradition at our university where you propose under this huge tree on campus. Only some people do it, not everyone. She literally threw a tantrum even though he planned a sweet proposal that would have pleased any other girl just because he didn't do it under the fricking tree. Usually having princess written across the rear of their pink sweatpants is a dead giveaway. In the 90s, it was a big trend to have princess written down one leg of the track pants. I made myself a pair in black with smack whore written down the side in red letters in the princess font. I'm starting to remember why my parents considered me to be such a huge disappointment. Lady who wrote that comment, thank you. This is a wonderful example of how to subvert a trend, and we're all better off for it. I once dated a girl who had a dad that bought her everything. He made a lot of money and was really great at saving it. His life's mission was to use that money to buy his B-word daughter's love. She was 22 and had her car paid for in full, insurance, phone bill, rent-free living, yada yada. For her birthday every year, she would get $1,000 in cash. I, on the other hand, was 23 at the time and paid for everything I owned. I had a crappier car than her because I paid for it myself. She would remind me often how much better her car was. I paid for all my other expenses and bills. Then, this insane thing happens. She gets a job at the bank I have all of my accounts at. She fricking looks up my bank account to see how much money I have. She tells me this and criticizes that I only have X amount in the bank when she has triple X in the bank and is so much better than me at saving money. I never once in our whole relationship brought up the money issue or how she didn't really work for what she had. This time, though, I lost my fricking mind. I mentioned everything that she had that she didn't pay for, and explained that if it wasn't for her daddy, she would be a boulder $20,000 in debt. This blow-up was the biggest fight I've had in any relationship. Our relationship ended there. I learned a valuable lesson here. Always date someone who has a similar work ethic and financial goals as yourself. I realized that I always resented her and could admit I was jealous of her getting handed money. That's not right, nor is it healthy. I'm happily married to a very hard-working woman who will help me raise a hard-working child. Oh, don't worry. They'll tell you they're a princess. Was seeing a girl for a few months, and I gave her something on Valentine's Day that read, "Be my Valentine," or some other variation. She responded with, "That's sweet, but my daddy will always be my Valentine." She was in her second semester of law school and in her mid-20s, so that whole daddy is the best man in the world thing was off-putting. She ended up being high maintenance and unpredictable. Bad combination. And of course, my most read story was about some daddy-obsessed girl I dated in the army. I'll let Jenna know that everyone else thinks it's strange too. I should mention that none of that unhealthy daddy attachment made its way into the bedroom. Thankfully, there was only one daddy in her life. I forgot to mention that she got married about a year ago and she did an entire album for her wedding shoot with her and her daddy. When she complains about her parents on the first date, going on about her lines of succession and how they're always forcing her to marry a prince from another fiefdom. And how she just wants the title, but never even cleaned up after herself and makes her nasty stepsister do it all because she's pretty much an orphan now. Stepson had a girlfriend who was teed off because he didn't buy her a 1-week anniversary gift. Run, dude, run. To elaborate, they are pretty young, early teens. She didn't get him anything. This girl was nuts, would call him over and over. If he didn't answer, she would text him 8 million times. Luckily, he has since moved with me, new school and different city altogether, which is good because they dated like 4 times over the year. She would break up with him and then want him back. Well, to be fair, they're young and probably receive a little more of the princess treatment from their parents. Let's just hope they grow out of it, or into it in a healthy way. Senior year of high school prom was coming up, and this one girl who I kinda knew asked my friend if he would go to prom with her. He said yes, but a few days later changed his mind, which was 100% a prick thing to do. She, however, really wanted someone to go to prom with, and the guy that turned her down, along with some of my other mutual friends, told me I should go with her. Which sounded like a good idea because she was kind of cute and I was going alone at that point. A week or so later, a few of us were hanging out at Nifty 50s and they gave us those little paper hat things and I wrote, "Prom?" on mine, and she said yes. Sick. On the way home from asking her out, she said to me, "How does it feel knowing that you're going to prom with the birthday princess?" First red flag. Upon further conversation, she told me that prom was going to be on her 18th birthday, and because of that, she was definitely going to get prom queen, which would most likely be the absolute last reason I'd want to get prom queen in her situation. Fast forward a week or so, I had just gotten home from school and I got a text from her asking if I wanted to go with her to pick out shoes for prom. I should tell you that halfway through my senior year, I moved to another school district 40-ish minutes away, and my date lived like 15 minutes on the other side of school. Not to mention that the car I drove was a gas-guzzling machine, and it was like $10 round trip when prices were high. I tried telling her that I had just gotten home, and that it would take me an hour or so to get there, and that I had work that I needed to get done. I also had zero interest in going, but that's beside the point. Reasonable excuse though. She lost it. She was saying all this stuff about how messed up it is that I wouldn't do this for her, and other random stuff that totally didn't make sense. Then she said, "I guess I'll just ask Anthony to go with me." Anthony was a close friend of mine who had off and on feelings for my date, and they were close friends. There was a reason he didn't ask her, but I can't remember. I told her to go ahead because that didn't bother me. I wasn't trying to date the girl. Hell, I wasn't even trying to get laid. I purely asked her out because she was dying to go to prom with someone, and I was single. Flash forward to day of prom. A few days before prom, she asked me if she should get a tan. I told her I really don't like that look, especially not awful spray tan. The day of prom, she showed up looking like a carrot and her hands looked like that of a black person. Her tan was bad. Uneven, blotchy, you name it. She was proud of it though, so who was I to tell her otherwise? She said, "How does the birthday princess look?" And I told her she looked beautiful. She told me at that time where to meet her and her friends who I was now taking, which was news to me, but I bit my tongue and went along with it. I get to her friend's house 5 minutes early, and she is 45 minutes late. When she finally arrives, she was wearing a tiara that read, "Birthday Princess." Her and her friend probably took 100 pics together, and me and the other dude, who I hated but by the end of the night found out he was actually pretty cool, just sat to the side waiting for our turn for the pics. I think we took 3 together. Now, when I tell people this part of the story, they get confused because apparently my school was weird. We had this thing called pre-prom, where basically we'd go up on stage in the auditorium, walked out with our date, get pictures taken, and get judged for prom king or queen. People do little cute things on stage in order to gain approval and to get more votes. Some funny, some cute, some just walked out like normal. What she made us do is she walks out on stage, first looking around. I creep up behind her with a huge happy birthday balloon, so everyone knew it was her birthday, tap her on the shoulder, and when she'd turn around, I'd be on one knee, put a sash on her that read, "Birthday Princess." It was cheesy, it was uncomfortable, I hated it. Prom time. So we get to prom and take our seat, we eat a little, and then people start going on the dance floor. I ask if she wants to dance, but she says she's not feeling well, and I should just go. I obliged and danced for a good 20 minutes, and when I look at her sitting down, she looks very upset. I notice her staring at the boy who turned her down dancing with another girl, and I felt bad for her. I went up to her and told her to come to the floor and have fun with everyone, and she says she's fine. A half hour passes before I walk up to her. She looks me dead in the eyes, and before I can say anything, she snaps and says, "You really need to learn to leave me the hell alone." Well then. I leave her at the table and go and hang out with my friends. People keep coming up to me and asking where my date is, and then someone asks, "Why is she crying?" The question then turns to, "What did you do to her?" It got to the point where even teachers and school faculty pulled me over asking if I did anything to upset her. An hour passes and it's time to announce prom king and queen. I sat down again and she calmed down by this point. She was telling the whole table how she has to be prom queen because it's her birthday and she's the birthday princess. I told her not to get her hopes up just in case it didn't happen, and she didn't like that at all. She wasn't prom queen, she wasn't even nominated. She ran out of the room crying. After it was announced and people started dancing again, I went up to the aforementioned Anthony and told him if he wanted to dance with my date, he could. He told me he would feel bad and didn't want to do that to me, but I assured him it would be fine. I looked over a little later, noticed them slow dancing, and that was the happiest I'd been all night. I then went off to dance with some of the other girls who didn't have dates, and for once, prom was fun. Too bad it ended 20 minutes later. As everyone is gathering their things and clearing out, my date finds me again and says, "I feel like you're upset with me." I didn't say a word. She asked if we could go to Applebee's because it's her birthday and they love singing to her every year. First, I told her she wasn't special, they do that to everyone. That was a real slap in the face to her. Secondly, I told her by the time we got there, we would only have 15 minutes before it closed. She told me that as long as we order before it's closed, we can stay there. As someone who was working as a dishwasher at the time, I knew how much of a prick move that was. She said, "Please, but I'm the birthday princess." I refused. The drive home was one of the most uncomfortable car rides of my life. Every time we passed a restaurant, "Do you think Denny's would sing to me? Do you think the diner would sing to me? Do you think McDonald's would sing to me?" I have never met someone, yet alone an 18-year-old, who was so obsessed with their birthday. I pulled up to her other friend's house, a bunch of people were going here after prom to hang out, and we all got out. As I was walking up the driveway, I got the thought, what the hell am I doing? I walked back to my car and drove away. In conclusion, while she wanted to feel like a princess, I felt like 2017 Prince. Also, the day of prom at school, I asked my friend if he wanted to hang out after prom. He told me he wasn't going because he was going to ask out the girl I was going with and didn't want to go alone. Fast forward a few months. I hadn't spoken to the girl I went to prom with since I drove away. Literally not a word. It was the day of graduation, and my one friend was having a graduation party. I went, and lo and behold, my date was there. A group of us started talking, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, the way you asked me to prom was cool, but the way that blank, the kid who didn't end up going to prom because I was going with her, would have asked me would have been so much better." His plan was going to be to get Snow White at Disney to ask this girl to prom because she was obsessed with Snow White. Like, she cried on senior trip at Disney when she saw her because she was so overwhelmed with excitement. Maybe the first red flag should have been that she was obsessed with princesses. Blimey. Listen, I think most of us came out there feeling a little less bad about our various cringe prom dates, and let's be thankful for that. I declined to send a selfie and got a B-word fit on the first day of our texting as I skipped work to feverishly sleep through the flu. "Honestly, I don't know if I can trust you. If you won't do such a simple thing, what if you abandon me in my hour of need in the airport or hospital?" I can only groan so hard. My friend's sister calls herself a princess. First of all, she's really picky about food and never eats anything gross, like chicken legs or wings. She once shed a fricking forced tear when she learnt that the thing she was eating is chicken legs at the middle of the buffet. We were in a restaurant with my friend and she tags along. So when we asked her order, she just said that we should know her favorite foods since we have known her for so long. Not really. I just ordered her some burger meal and she threw a tantrum since she doesn't eat ketchup, and I should have known this. What the frick? We were in Burger King. She ended up clearing her whole meal straight to the floor and ordered salad. When she talks, she requires her boyfriend to pay her full attention. Looking away is not an option, or he would disrespect her. Goes for coffee with someone. We should see a movie. Sure thing. You're paying, right? I don't have any money. So I did. We walk past the snack bar and she goes and queues up. Slightly confused, I stand in line with her. She orders what she wants and then looks at me. I chuckle, place my ticket on the counter, and walk off and out of the cinema. Lawyers. What's the stupidest reason you've been asked to sue for? And what was the outcome? I saw photos of a horribly dead couple. They had a son who was an amateur race car driver, and they ignored a fence, several no trespassing signs, and security guards to go stand in a restricted area and film their son's race. A crash happened, they got destroyed, and the son then sued, saying that security shouldn't have physically restricted them from entering that area. I don't know how it ended. I hope it ended with the son getting slapped by the judge, jury, and lawyers. While going through lifeguard training, one of the workers told us a story about why we have to always get consent on children. A lifeguard that he knew had gotten a drowning child out of a pool and saved his life. The mother tried to sue the lifeguard for putting her child on the ground too hard. Luckily, the lifeguard won, but it made me a bit scared to be a lifeguard. I defended a guy who sold his house. He got sued by the buyers. The buyers were told by a neighbor that there was an underground storage tank on the property, and that it had leaked oil. The neighbor was convinced it was there. We went to trial a year later, and the buyer never could produce any evidence of an underground tank or contamination. The jury gave him $13,000 anyway. You're a crappy lawyer? He's either a crappy lawyer or a crappy liar. Either way, something smells about this story. Why the crap would the neighbor say crap like that? Well, I think we've all got a little soiled by these various puns, people. Let's move along, shall we? One of my friends had to defend a government agency from a seemingly serious lawsuit. The issue was about a kindergarten, this is Australia, so it's a preschool age, near a government work site. And the issue was some white trash B-words for kids have breathing issues from dangerous levels of dust. Anyway, my friend isn't high on the ladder, so a lot of the legwork fell to her. She had to go to the suspect site and found it to be a park undergoing massive landscaping. After convincing the bogan that the kids needed a medical examination if they want to pursue the case in a meeting, she notices the mother is a massive chain smoker. This basically led to her correctly guessing that the kids' breathing problems were caused by their mother smoking non-stop all day. Evidence to corroborate it includes the medical examination and 3 incidents where the fire department were called to the bogan's house for fires caused by smoking in bed. In conclusion, mother tries to sue for health issues of children, only to be found as leading cause of said health issues. My childhood friend almost got sued for shooting his friend with an airsoft gun. The pellet hit skin and made the kid go crying to his dad. His dad was some big-shot lawyer and had the kid arrested for being in possession of a firearm or weapon on his property. He later wanted to sue my friend's family to pay for his son's injuries. The injury was a red welt mark, nothing serious. The stupid part was that the lawyer's son invited them over to play with the airsoft guns in the first place. My aunt, Jane, has a medical condition. Without revealing too much, she is an adult but considered a minor because of her dependent status. When she gets sick, she needs to go to the hospital. One day she had an episode and the hospital didn't have enough expertise to handle her case. They said she needed to be taken to the capital city for treatment. Her immediate family were all out of the country, so my grand-aunt, her aunt, hired a service to take her to the capital for treatment. When Aunt Jane's siblings found out about what happened, they decided to sue my grand-aunt for kidnapping. According to them, my grand-aunt had kidnapped Aunt Jane and taken her to the hospital against her will. By the way, my grand-aunt actually got written permission from Aunt A's mother. Now, we live in a third world where bribes sway the hand of justice, so that trial actually lasted a few years. We won in the end, but I get really angry when I think about the lawyers who took their case. My dad, an old ridiculous man, tried to sue McDonald's because he tripped over those stumps in the parking lot. McDonald's. And to make it worse, they were actually really kind to him and got him a first aid kit. Wow, I think this is the first time I've been so ashamed to be related to him, and trust me, there have been a lot of times. Any case where someone's life is saved and they sue the person who saved them. That crap is messed up. That's the main reason why Good Samaritan laws exist. Otherwise, nobody would save anyone else's life due to fear of lawsuit. In some states, the Good Samaritan laws do not really provide much, if any, protection to a would-be rescuer. Good God, is this an American thing? Because that's absurd. I've never heard of anything like that happening over here. A middle-aged woman lost her footing in the parking lot of my significant other's work the other day. At first, she said she was fine, just scraped her knee, etc. But as soon as she sat down, she started coming up with a laundry list of imaginary injuries she had suffered. Oh, she hit her head. And oh, she's feeling nauseous and faint. Oh, and she has a bad hip and shoulder and back. She's in so much pain she can barely move. Significant other called 911 as is protocol. The EMT gave her a clean bill of health and said that there was nothing wrong with her. A skinned knee, sure, but that was it. She refused an offer to go to the hospital, saying she felt better now. Well, 10 minutes later, after the EMTs leave, she and her husband are out taking pictures in the parking lot. She's walking just fine. But guess who's probably going to sue? The sad part is they're going to get a settlement, even though it's total BS. It's not worth the time and trouble to let the case go to court, so the lawyers will just throw a few $1,000s her way to get her to go away. Apparently this happens pretty often. People know they'll get paid off, so they turn on the waterworks over even the tiniest injury or slight. Friend had a paternity or child support case walk through his door that was mind-blowing. Couple A and Couple B go out for a night on the town. They're drinking and riding around in a car and decide to get frisky. Only problem? They only have one condom between them. So, being the bright young minds they are, they decide to share the condom. Couple A uses condom first, passes it back to Couple B. Dude in Couple B turns the condom inside out and uses it. Girl in Couple B becomes pregnant with dude from Couple A's kid. Welcome to the South. You can't make this crap up. Dude, Guy B was a frickin' moron for turning the condom inside out. What he should have done was worn it normal, then sued Guy A for making him gay when Guy A's splooge touched his junk. I'm from the South too. I'm not a lawyer, but when I was a kid, our neighbor decided to sue us over 4 inches of land. So on that side of the house, we had a wooden catwalk that led into our backyard. It was in poor condition when we bought the house, so a few years later, my parents decided to hire some contractors to repair it. Within a week of them finishing it, my parents got a letter from a lawyer which stated that our neighbor was suing them for infringing on his property with this new catwalk. A surveyor was hired and a 3 to 4 year legal battle ensued. The end result? Yes, the catwalk was 4 inches over the property line. However, the old catwalk had been rotting and sloping on that side before the work, so it was probably more than 4 inches over before. My parents had to pay to bring in a new crew and rectify that problem. He built a fence on his front lawn right along the property line, all the way down the road. His wife vanished. We suspect that she left him for being a crazy butthole, and his kids stopped visiting. He moved out about a year after winning the court case. Oh, I almost forgot the best part of the story. He finally decided to settle. He changed the terms of what he wanted to something agreeable because, and I crap you not, the spirits told him it was time. I almost feel bad for the guy because he clearly has some sort of dementia, but he made my parents' lives a living hell for 3 or 4 years. One time when I was 17, I was backing out of my driveway to go to school. There was almost no traffic then because it was before the average Joe left for work in the morning. I checked to see if it was clear, and it appeared that it was. Someone thought that would be a great time to park behind me on the other side of the small road so they could let their kid wait for the bus stop. I just happened to be looking around my opposite shoulder, so I dinged the side of their bumper. They were driving an SUV, didn't want to get insurance involved, and didn't seem to be annoyed, etc. I know, I was a dumb teenager and my dad told me it'd just be cheaper to pay for the damages out of pocket rather than be an unsafe driver for the next 40 years. I ended up paying them like $500 or something since the damage was simply cosmetic. It seemed high in my mind, but that was because I wasn't used to how high car parts can go, like thousands of dollars for a molded plastic kind of thing. Fast forward a few weeks, I'm served with papers to a lawsuit. Apparently the driver and kid are claiming medical damages and many thousands of dollars of damage to their vehicle, including replacing most of the front end. They were asking $500,000 or something. My insurance company said that since I didn't report it, there probably wasn't much they could do, but they'd check. A week after that, an insurance company agent asks me to come in and talk with him, which I do. I'm completely straight with them. They aren't annoyed at all, they just want to get my side of the story and show me the proof the other people had that the story was as they say. First, they had an invoice from a garage that was nearly unreadable. Each line item was for multiple thousands of dollars. Among them, some of the ones we could read were things like replaced engine and repaired/welded frame. Second, the kid had some kind of surgery done between the accident and the lawsuit, which they claim was the direct result of said accident. What was it? The kid developed appendicitis a week or two later. Third, the driver was undergoing treatment at a chiropractor and had a note from them saying they would never be able to lift heavy objects or stand for more than a few minutes at a time, and would probably be in severe pain due to pinched nerves and slipped discs caused by the accident. So I'm sitting there with all these images of being in debt forever running through my head, and the insurance agent is kind of giggling at those things. I was kind of shocked, but they walked me through why each piece of their proof was just an attempt to look serious enough to get a settlement deal on the table. Sure enough, they were suing for $500,000, but willing to settle for $100,000 because the family was so exhausted in dealing with the accident. The insurance company had someone inspect my car, and they were able to say without hesitation that the car had not been through an accident like the kind the people were claiming. They wanted to examine their vehicle too, but apparently said vehicle had been given to relatives out of state because it brought back such bad memories. Also, on a hunch, they looked at the background of the people involved. What do you know? It turns out they just got a big settlement for another serious car accident in another state. A little more digging was done, and the police were notified. I don't know if they ever went to jail for it, but apparently their proof was fake. The kid did get his appendix removed, but their freaking health insurance paid for that. My dad is a lawyer, so I have a couple of these. My dad was once asked to represent a man who tripped on the sidewalk due to a tree. He said he walked that sidewalk every day. The time he walked it and tripped, apparently a tree jumped out in front of his path and tripped him. Second one is a little weirder. A woman called my dad for legal advice because there was a spider in her baby's diaper package. When asked, she said she put that diaper with the spider in it on her baby. She wanted to sue Pampers. My dad hung up on her there. I saved the best for last. My dad represented a taxi driver for when he got into a car crash. Everything went like a normal case. My dad won the case for the driver very quickly. As he was with the guy for payment, he found out that the taxi driver was blind. You heard that right, he was 80% blind in both eyes. No one found out except my dad, not the taxi driver's clients, not the jury, not the judge, not even the DMV. He walked out of my dad's office with one of those tapping sticks and drove home. I mean, that last story isn't so much stupid as outright ridiculous, and for a completely different reason than the others. My goodness. Not a lawyer, but I'm a client manager at a law firm. I once had a man call in trying to sue the local Popeyes because they gave him a large order of wings instead of a small order of thighs. He had witnesses to prove it and everything. So basically, you're the last line of defense between the lawyers and the insanity of the real world. Lady calls 911 and says the dump truck in front of her is spilling gravel all over the road and her truck. I ask her if any damage is done to her vehicle and she says she doesn't know. Officers find the dump truck, follow it about a mile and don't observe any gravel spilling out. They pull it over anyway to get driver, company, insurance information, assuming she wants to make a damage to property report. I ask the lady to stop with the officers or bring her vehicle to the police department so they can see the damage and do the report for her insurance company. She tells me she doesn't have time because her daughter is late for a singing lesson. 2 weeks later, after a hailstorm, she came to the PD to make a report for the damage, but she is driving another vehicle. She claims her truck is already at the repair shop and the estimate is $3,000. Officer tells her he can't make a report for damage without seeing the vehicle, but he goes ahead and makes an information-only report to appease her. Now she's trying to sue the PD because the officers won't testify that the dump truck is the cause of the damage. Kind of like, I'm going to sue you unless you perjure yourself. Good lord. Guy sued the creators of Budweiser because he suffered emotional distress, mental injury, and financial loss because he didn't nail beautiful women like the adverts promised, thus causing him to consume more and more. The judge basically told him to take it like a man like the rest of us borderline alcoholics do. My friend had a client who wanted to sue his parents for emotional abuse. That abuse consisted of giving the client a name he didn't like. It's not even as if the name was one of those ridiculous ones. It was a perfectly ordinary one, if a little uncommon in our country. Needless to say, my friend didn't agree to represent the guy. My fire tech teacher has a great story he told me of. He worked with the fire department, and they're called in to a car accident. The first car is smashed in, and they get the jaws of life. Open it up, one man survived, and his 9-month pregnant wife was decapitated. Another firefighter proceeded to do an emergency C-section and save the man's baby. Well, after finding out he was out of scope for doing so, the man sued the firefighter. He sued him for saving his only child. For those who asked, the guy won the lawsuit. The firefighter lost his license, uncertain if he was jailed, and yeah, so he lost. Worked in law firms for 10 plus years. Heard a great story where a guy comes in with his wife and teen daughter to discuss defense against a claim that the dad fiddles the daughter. The guy basically says, "It's my daughter, I can do what I want with her." The mum says nothing. The lawyer was disbarred for vaulting the table and punching the dad. My sister was sued by this elderly woman. It was her senior year of high school toward the end of the year. She's leaving school and takes a right onto the road. Her and the elderly woman got into a car accident and the police officer found my sister at fault. Within a year later, my parents learn that the old lady is suing them for doctor appointments and such. When it comes to the case, we find that the elderly woman had been taking prescription pills that affect motor skills. Worst case, the pills were in the daughter's name, not hers. Not only that, but the old lady had been speeding in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. She actually admitted to it. Parents didn't have to pay a dime to the old broad. Not a lawyer, but I did get sued once. For child support. My deadbeat dad ex-husband called after 5 years of no contact and no financial support. He's dying. Kids see him. The younger one wants to stay with him for a while. She stays with him and his new wife and daughter. They live in the same town. He miraculously gets better. 4 months in, I get a letter from his lawyer for child support. Says I'm a deadbeat mum, he's had her for years without any support from me. I walk into the remediation meeting with school and medical records, divorce and support papers, history of his non-payment through the state, and of course, proof of his other daughter who still lived with me. Apparently he forgot to tell his lawyers a few things. Younger daughter is dumped back on my doorstep the next day, and I never hear from his lawyer again. That was over 20 years ago, and he's still alive. A lady tried suing a train company because her husband was killed by one of their trains. Sounds responsible? No. Her husband came to a stop at the crossing, then decided to drive his truck through the barrier and was hit by the train. In the process, parts of this man went flying into Kingdom Come and landed on some lady's windshield. She sued the man's family for damages and because it traumatized her. Oh my gosh. As ridiculous as the first lawsuit in the story is, I can't help but think that suing the man's family for having the nerve to die in a traumatic way and leave his wife alone isn't the most humane course of action. In fact, it may be why the first lady sued in the first place, to maybe recoup some of the losses. I could go on all day, but I'll limit it to the most egregious two. I'm a retired public defender. Before I started with the PD's office, I worked briefly for a private firm where I encountered these two cases. 1. A single-parent mum had to fly out of town for training for her job. Deadbeat dad wasn't paying child support because he claimed he couldn't find a job. This will be important later. Mum left her 4-year-old daughter with her sister, the child's aunt. While mum's away, the aunt takes the girl to Chuck E. Cheese. A repairman at Chuck E. Cheese opens an access panel to repair the pulleys that operated the giant puppets. Repairman goes in back to get a tool and leaves the access panel open. The girl puts her hand in the opening and her fingers are severed. She is rushed to the ER and the docs want a parent. With mum out of town, deadbeat dad is called in. After consulting with the docs and the girl in the OR, deadbeat dad calls the law firm from the waiting room and wants to know if he has a case. He wants to include lost wages as part of his damages. I left for public defender soon after and I don't know how the case ever resolved. 2. A 28-year-old man marries a 16-year-old girl, much to the dismay of her parents. In this state, a 16-year-old can marry without parental consent if she is pregnant, which she was. He proves to be a chronically unemployed and abusive husband. The mother-in-law convinces the girl to take the baby and come home. With her gone, husband of the year goes out and finds a high school girl. The wife changes her mind and returns to her husband with the baby. Months later, husband is served in a paternity suit from the high school girl he was with during the wife's absence. He makes an appointment with me and wants to know if I can force the mother-in-law to pay the child support to high school girl, since it was the mother-in-law's fault that the wife wasn't there for him to have fun times with, therefore forcing him to seek out high school girl. We didn't take the case. Fairly unrelated to the question, but I rarely get to tell this story. I was picking up an old lady, 80-ish, for church one Sunday morning because my parents had asked me to. I was like 17 at the time. The lady doesn't live too far from the church, so I say sure, why not, and proceed to pick her up from her house. I pick her up and take her to church, no problem. I sleep through the service and take her back because that's just what you do for people you give rides to a place. When I got there, she slipped out of my car, Explorer, and fell to the ground and she started wailing that something was broken. So I get an ambulance over there, and of course it's her hip. No big deal, happens all the time to old people. They patch her up and I think replace her hip because it was like number 3 for her. And so a few weeks later, I found out that the lady is suing me for her falling out of my car. What the hell? So I bring it up to my insurance company and they actually settled with her for an extraordinary amount of money. $200,000, I believe. What? How is this even a thing? Anyone? $200,000 was probably the cost of her medical bills and she had to sue you to get your auto insurance to cover it. Her health insurance may have refused to pay, and this could have been her only option. The same thing happens when someone injures themselves in your home and can't afford the medical bills. They sue you to get your homeowners/renters insurance to cover it. I'm sure my lawyer thinks it's a bit ridiculous a girl physically attacked me over a $1 burrito while she was blackout drunk and is now trying to press assault and battery against me when all I did was shove her back a few times in self-defense. What's your homeowners association horror story? Well, here it goes. It's not my story, but my dad's. When I was real little, my parents owned a house in Florida that was part of a homeowners association. Behind the house was a lagoon or pond or whatever, and the backyard went right up to it. Basically, the backyard ended at a little slope that went right down into the water. One day, my parents got a notification from the HOA that the grass in the back was unkempt and this was a violation and there would be a fine if he didn't cut it. What they meant was the grass on the slope into the pond needed to be cut, even though that wasn't a part of the property. My dad said whatever, broke out the lawnmower and got to work. Just as he was finishing up, a huge frickin' alligator comes rushing up out of the water. My dad does the only logical thing. He lets go of the lawnmower and runs. The mower runs down the slope, hits the alligator, most likely teeing it off, and sinks halfway into the water. My dad leaves it there because he ain't gonna mess with no scaly death machine. A week or so later, another notice arrives, this time about yard tools being left out, the mower in the pond surrounded by agitated miniature water dragons. And yes, there was a fine. Dad said, screw 'em, and refused to pay a fine or any HOA dues ever again. They added monthly fines for non-payment. Made a point of specifically never paying the HOA every month when he gave the mortgage to the bank. The bank didn't care since they got their money. Who cares about some crappy board? About a year later, when my parents sold the house, the HOA came to collect. Guess what my dad said? That's right, he said, F off. Take my payment out of the lawnmower, if the gator lets you. Then they drove off into the sunset. As far as we know, the lawnmower is still there in the water, guarded by scary dinosaurs. I had just moved into my house a few months prior when I got a letter threatening to be fined $200, stating that my mailbox wasn't black. I thought surely they had the wrong house because my mailbox was in fact black. So I contacted them and they gave a runaround arguing that it wasn't. I told them to come and look and of course they said it was on me to prove to them it was black. So I snapped a photo and emailed it to them. I hear nothing back for well over a month, then get another letter giving me a courtesy week extension before I'm fined. I'm livid at this point, so contact the HOA again asking for an explanation as to what exactly the problem is. I'm finally told that neighbors felt my mailbox was rather worn and needed to be painted or replaced. So basically, it wasn't black enough for them. So I fricking painted it. Now for the part that set me over the edge. After a few months or so, I learned the fricking HOA will replace a mailbox as it's covered under our terms. So I called them asking about why they threatened to fine me when they were the ones that should replace it if not to standard. They stated it was because they had no open work orders for my mailbox and that it was my responsibility to notify them if it needed maintenance, not theirs. If you fancy being really petty, every week send a request saying that your mailbox is in need of repair. I'm no stranger to these sorts of stories from petty, bored bureaucrats, but do they retire and resolve to do the same thing on HOAs? Because supposedly these associations are run by people weirdly passionate about the neighborhood. This just seems intentionally negligent and crappy. This is actually something that is an ongoing battle between my friend's mum and her HOA, or more specifically, one member. She lives inside this circular complex full of townhouses with a roundabout in the center that used to have a lot of trees and looked really nice, almost like a mini park. The HOA decided to cut down all of the trees without giving notice, and my friend's mum was annoyed. She went to complain about it and they basically said, "Sorry, too late." In protest of them doing that, she decided to buy this big inflatable palm tree that she stuck on her balcony for all to see. Decided to file a complaint because it looked gaudy. She knew exactly who it was, and it upset her more that this person did that instead of coming to talk to her after years of living near each other. She was able to keep her tree, and when Christmas came around, she even decorated it. She decided she was going to wage this war against the HOA, and this neighbor by having annoying inflatable decorations on her balcony. When it started warming up, she bought a flamingo, which she likes to dress in Chicago Cubs or Blackhawks gear, depending on the season. I told my friend he should get her a 6-foot wacky waving inflatable tube man to put on there next, which I think would be hilarious, but I don't know if she wants to take it that far. They towed my car from my driveway. Yes, my driveway. Tags were legit. This was an HOA that had a limited allotment of parking spaces that were nowhere near the actual homes. The homes themselves had mini driveways. So after a really long day, there were no parking spaces available, so I temporarily parked in the driveway, went in the house, came back out 30 minutes later to try to find a parking spot, walked outside and thought my car got stolen. Nope, butthole neighbor, probably, plus towing company, plus California. Triple screwed. When we first moved in, I asked the neighbor across the town how serious the HOA was here. He said bad. Then told me a story where he got a notice with a photo of his recycle bin being left in the street for too long. The photo was of him walking the recycling bin back to his garage. Lol. I had the HOA come out to approve a fence I was going to install. The lady at the HOA office was very nice and said my plans were within the covenant bylaws, etc. We just needed to have the inspector check it out himself to sign off. When he gets to my house, he says he doesn't understand what I wanted to do. I explained the type of fence I wanted to install, and he said that wasn't, from his knowledge, allowed. I walked him out to the street and pointed 2 houses down and say, "That house right there has the fence I want to install." He scoffs at this, walks down to look, and sure enough, it was exactly as I described it. He tells me, "Well, we don't like to have a bunch of different types of fences in this neighborhood." I reply, "I don't care what you prefer. The covenant says I can have that fence and that's what I'm going to install because it's within the specifications of the covenant." Old fella didn't have much to say after that. I got a letter the next week with "approved for fence install." What is the universal deal with all these people? Are they just all that bored that they exclusively live for the small moments of competition in their life? Who does this? October 2016, my condo started to collapse. We were forced to leave and officially homeless for a year, with a card from the Red Cross and everything. The HOA did nothing. No one would admit to anything, explain anything, or contact us at all. For a year we waited, when we were finally told the building was structurally sound again, only to be told a week ago that we have to get out and get everything we own out for a month while they do repairs. Sometime this spring. Worst of all, we were required to keep paying our HOA fees through the entire thing. The only way owners were offered non-payment was if we signed a document promising not to sue anyone. Never again with a condo. Never again with an HOA, and never again with River Towers in Alexandria, Virginia. My ex's boyfriend's father was part of the homeowners board for their townhouse community. His wife would walk their dog around the entire neighborhood every day and carry a notebook to write infractions to report back to her husband. Ridiculous stuff. Neighbors have a window AC unit? Reported and fined. Have a garden that's a square foot too big? Reported and fined. Some people have absolutely no lives. Not my story, but my dad's. He moved into a new townhouse in summer of 2013. It was a foreclosure property as the previous tenants were kicked out for not paying their mortgage and for not paying their HOA dues. They gave everyone in the HOA new patios and decks the summer prior. It was required and you had to get a new deck/patio. But the tenants had to pay for them in monthly installments in the next 3 years along with their HOA dues. As I said, the previous tenants foreclosed on their home. However, there was one rule placed when they got the decks, which was that you couldn't move out without paying off your deck first. He was told by the HOA that he would not have to pay off the deck because it was foreclosed and he was not responsible at all for paying it off. Sweet, free deck. He signed off on that. He moved in, but then he started getting assessments from the HOA for the deck. But wait, he wasn't supposed to be paying for the deck. He fought with the board. Even with the signed thing saying we didn't have to pay for the deck, the board went against him. He ended up having to pay off the remaining balance on the deck. To this day, he refuses to speak about this topic. It's a trigger for him. Most recent one was this year. They sent a letter saying no Christmas decorations until the 1st of December, and they all had to come down before the 3rd of January. They also sent a whole list of forbidden ornaments, including anything inflated or not in keeping with the spirit of the season. So basically all the light-hearted, funny ornaments. Look out the windows, kids. It's the Grinch's sad fricking cave. Anyway, we had beautiful weather on Black Friday, but had to wait until things got cold again before we could get out there and put up lights. Then, after New Year's Day, we had exactly 1 day to take down all our lights, and the wind chill was -25. Naturally, we decided, screw that, there's no way they will bill anyone for this, and opted to just leave the lights unplugged. We got a bill before 10 a.m. on the 3rd. Not a homeowners association, but a neighborhood association, so close enough. 2 quick stories about the same folks. A friend of mine who had a diseased, rotting, falling over tree in his front yard had to request the association's approval to have the tree removed. His request was initially denied and stalled for several weeks because the association wanted professional verification that the tree wasn't actually diseased. A cursory glance at a tree that was practically horizontal in the guy's yard wasn't enough, apparently. The church I'm a member of owns a house next door to the church. The house has some historical significance and is architecturally interesting, but at this point it's been totally abandoned for years. The family who built the house no longer has any interest in it, they sold it to the church and have no relatives in the city anymore. Because of the architecture and the length of the abandonment, doing anything productive with the house is likely a $1 million+ project. But the association has flatly refused to approve any non-reno plans and simultaneously has refused any notion at all to tear the house down. So the church is stuck with a house that is in increasingly bad shape, totally empty, can't be sold because of its condition, and the neighborhood association will not approve any plan to do anything with the house except leave it alone. I'll amend my earlier statements. These people aren't just bored and looking for a fight. They are all these things and also dedicated to avoiding all the actual duties they should be fulfilling in approving helpful work. For a man who has nothing to do with these bodies, they sure get me angry. Not a horror story yet, but it could be. When we moved in, someone stopped by to say hi, but more like to tell us our boat can't be parked on our lot. My wife told her, "Well, we read all the rules and it doesn't say that." She replied, "Well, I wrote the rules, so I should know." My wife told her to go read them again. Don't hear anything for months. When we get our annual dues packet, there is a newsletter saying our lot is in violation and that we stated plans to modify our garage to fit the boat in the spring. We never said that. They suggested setting a deadline for us and setting a vote to add boats to the list they already had. Campers, fifth wheels, motorhomes, and travel trailers. Bought the house intending to build a detached garage, but in order to comply with the design rules, it would cost me $90,000. So I'm waiting till I get an official anything in the mail, then I'll get a storage unit. By the way, my neighbor has been here 6 months longer than us and they have a boat in their driveway too. They sent us a series of nasty notices to remove the dead tree in our front yard. The tree had lost all of its leaves and it was unsightly, apparently. The catch is that they sent us this notice in November. You know, like fall, when perfectly healthy trees lose their leaves. We pretended we didn't understand which tree they were talking about until spring, when the tree magically came back to life. "We're also going to fine you for leaving all that strange white stuff in your yard in the winter." Mine involves kids, cops, assault, a sex scandal, and the elderly. My very first place in college that I didn't rent was a townhouse condo. Typical cookie-cutter, 3-storied, 4 to a section, little cutout of suburbia for beginners. I lived near the back of the development. This meant driving by or past the front units every day to get to and from work and school. Our HOA board president, Sonia, lived across the street from our HOA treasurer, Zelda. Sonia was in her 30s, ran an illegal daycare out of her home, and I hated driving by her house after 3 p.m. or on weekends because her 2 elementary-aged kids would hide behind parked cars and run in front of your vehicle, screaming, "Slow down!" I got really scared after this happened a few times and only drove 5 miles per hour through there, and the little crapheads kept doing it. I spoke with their mum about how unsafe jumping in front of cars was. I'm only going 5 miles per hour because I'm terrified and they're basically harassing me and our neighbors weekly. Sonia says her kids are being neighborhood monitors and I should be thankful for their diligence. WTF. A week later at 7 p.m., after most of the residents are home, mostly young families, I pull in after working my retail job after class. I notice a tow truck. Then 2, then 3. Holy fricking crap. They're towing everyone in the neighborhood. I park in my garage and run upstairs and tell my roommates to move their cars from the street parking. They run out and sure as crap, everyone who parked on the street is getting towed. There's 2 of my neighbors fighting with the tow drivers that they've always parked there. It's a parking area, it's in our homeowner's booklet. We whip it out and the tow truck drivers say they're just following orders of Sonia and they leave when the police show up. Sonia put up home-printed paper signs and signed a contract with the tow company in the middle of the day without telling anyone. The cops advised all residents that tomorrow this would be effective, but that the homemade signs Sonia made were not legal and there was no posted "no parking" signs. Guys, that night she was out in the street with a red bucket of paint, painting the curb red. She had the tow company post their tow signs and "no parking" signs the next afternoon. Goodbye street parking. Now anyone who didn't fit in the garage had to park 3 blocks away outside the condo units. The next straw was when one day 4 large evergreen trees were cut down from a communal park in the development. Old lady and treasurer Zelda found out Sonia had paid her sideman, who was also an arborist, over $8,000 of HOA money to cut these trees down, without any discussion or approval from the HOA board. Zelda flipped out, and the next HOA meeting let everyone know what happened to the trees and how Sonia screwed our HOA money away. We were planning for a community co-op garden. After the 6 o'clock meeting, I guess someone else on the board called Sonia to let her know that she was going to be removed from the HOA president seat due to the unapproved expenses, towing issue, and more. Well, at about 8 p.m., I hear screaming. Like blood-curdling screams from a woman. "Help! Call the police!" People, it's Zelda. She's outside her condo, fricking screaming. Sonia came over, punched the 70-year-old Zelda in the face, pulled her out of her own home, locked her out, and was now threatening to harm Zelda's disabled and bedridden elderly husband, who was upstairs. Zelda's fricking hysterical. I'm on the phone with the police, and about 5 neighbors are also outside on the phone with the police. Zelda's screaming every curse word in the book through her own front door at our crazy ex-HOA president. Sonia was arrested that night for crazy crap like assault and holding someone hostage. Since Sonia was a single parent, her kids were taken away by relatives about an hour after CPS showed up. Zelda had this gnarly black eye and huge scratches on her chest, where I guess Sonia clawed through her shirt and pulled her into the haymaker. I only lived there 14 months and moved due to the escalating issues with the HOA. Wait, so things continued to escalate after this? What happened? Were the members threatening to nuke each other? When I was a kid, I lived in one of the 2 front rooms of the house, which were the hottest in the summer and the coldest in the winter. My dad didn't like to use the AC, so we all just had fans. One summer, it got so unbearably hot in my room that fans just weren't cutting it, and I was miserable. My dad then put an AC unit in my window, and it was awesome. But it was short-lived because the HOA told us to take it down because it was an eyesore. My parents told them it was for their child, but they didn't care, so my parents had to take it down. The kicker is that just down the street, a guy who had the exact same model house as us had an AC unit installed in the exact same window as the one we had it in, and the HOA never said a word to him. Didn't happen to me personally, but I guess I can tell you about my parents' experience with their HOA. Dad retired and decided that he really wanted to buy a camper and travel. Mum was all about it, both of them very excited. So Dad runs off and trades his F-150 truck for an F-250 with a big diesel V8, buys a gooseneck camper and waits for spring. Camper in the backyard, truck in the garage, no big deal. Not long after, he gets a visit from a lady. She's got a list of rules from the HOA that was established long after my parents had built their house, something like 15 years later when the subdivision really took off, saying that Dad couldn't have the camper on his property because it was an eyesore. Mind you, this camper is in the backyard between a 6-foot privacy fence. You could still see it, sure, but it's not like it was old and in disrepair either. So here's my retired parents living in a subdivision that has an HOA that was established long after they built their home, and the HOA is expecting them to abide by rules they didn't agree to. He never moved the camper. Not mine, but one of my good friends has a rather insane HOA. They actually used rented surveying equipment to determine that his clothesline was 1 inch taller than his fence, and fined him several $100s for some stupid structure beyond the fence rule they had. Same HOA had someone walking around actually measuring the length of the grass with a ruler and issuing warnings for mowing. We live in an HOA neighborhood and had a neighbor trying to sell his house a few years ago. I kept my trash cans by my garage. They aren't ratty looking or stinky, they looked brand new, and noticed when I'd come home, they were gone. After looking, I find them behind my fence in my lawn. This happened 3 times in a week, so after that I got annoyed and thought someone was screwing with me. I go to the hardware store and got the largest chain and padlock I could find and started chaining them to the post on my front porch. My neighbor is outside and I say, "Hey Craig, you wouldn't happen to know what keeps happening to my trash cans?" Apparently he scoured the HOA rulebook and found out they are required to be out of sight except on trash day. He He thought my trash cans being visible is why he was having a hard time selling his insanely overpriced house in a crap market and was moving them himself. Never talked to me, never got a notice from the HOA. I yelled at him for a while and told him he's a fricking child and he should know better than to repeatedly come onto my property and screw with my stuff without my knowledge at over 40 years old. Trash cans or not, it's my stuff, my property, land, fence, and lawn. Everyone in our neighborhood receives fines for leaving garage cans at the road. It was trash day. But you didn't put it out 90 seconds before the truck arrived and remove it 13.6 seconds after. Shame on you. Well, if you're as aggravated as I am, let's end on the high note of the story of triumph over the formation of one of these monstrous organizations. So it was a new community and my family just bought a house. So once all the other houses got built, this lady says she's going to start the HOA as per our agreement in the contract. So they call for a block party. No one shows up. A month later, another gathering at their home. No one shows up. 6 months pass by, call for a meet and greet at the community mailboxes. No one shows up. 2 months later, we get a letter asking for dues. Us and our neighbors next door and across the street talk about no one paying, and we spread the word to our 30 other neighbors and the HOA died. Haven't heard from them in a few years. When did doing the right thing horribly backfire? I was in an extremely weird and once-in-a-lifetime kind of car accident, where I was supposed to be not at fault. I really don't want to go into detail, but another car hit me going twice the speed limit, sending both of us rolling down into a ditch. I got out through the windshield since it was shattered and was able to cut the airbag. The other car was in much worse shape and was on fire. I ran up to see if the driver was okay, but she was falling in and out of consciousness. Her car was upside down and the roof was caving in, pressing her into her seat. The seatbelt was tight around her and her airbag wasn't deflating. I struggled with the door and was able to get her out as the fire spread to her. I remember passing out a little after I was able to put out the fire on her legs. Woke up in the ambulance, broken leg and concussion. EMTs said I was only able to save her from all the adrenaline coursing through my system. The police that wrote the report found her at fault and said I was a hero, but no good deed goes unpunished. She had first-degree burns on her legs and face and had super cheap-ass insurance. She ended up suing me and dragging me into a 4-year legal process that not only cost my insurance thousands, but had me spending money on legal fees and lost wages from constantly having to go to court. It was finally settled because somehow all she needed to prove was that I was at least 1% at fault and my insurance folded. She was awarded my full liability, $200,000, plus $25,000 that I'm on the hook for personally. I was able to get my car paid off and whatever was left in my pocket for a new car had to go to her. It's been 6 years since the accident and I still owe about $12,000, but I'm trying to avoid paying that. The last time I talked to my attorney after she was awarded damages, he said something that I'll always think back on and wish I could have changed my actions. He said if he was in my shoes and knew the outcome, he would have left her there to burn. At least you know when you're in a situation where you have no time to think, just react, you do the right thing and fight for the stranger's life. People like you reinvigorate my goodwill towards others. Sure, it ended poorly, but no matter how cynical that woman's actions may make us, you are the saving grace that keeps us inspired and willing to bear ourselves. What? I literally cannot comprehend why so many stories on this thread involve people suing their saviors. Human greed knows no bounds. It makes me want to live alone in the wilderness. In one of my previous scripts on lawsuits, there is a trend of this happening in America. Sadly, it seems that when people do get into life-altering situations, the only way they can recoup their losses is by suing anyone they can who was even tangentially involved. It's awful, but it's true for that country. I was in the parking lot of a store one time when a lady dropped a bunch of stuff off her cart. She was having trouble picking up the box of bulk items. I told her that I would help her and we both picked the box up and put it in the trunk of her car. She then sprayed me with pepper spray and screamed. I was left confused as to why I was attacked as she almost ran me over driving out of there. I was at a club and saw my friend's girlfriend sitting in a booth, not looking so great. I decided to go over to help her. I told my friend he should probably take her home and helped her to start walking outside. She then threw up all over my sports jacket. At that point, I had vomit all over me and the bouncer wanted her gone ASAP, so I had to leave the club in a hurry. In all the excitement, I forgot that I had left my tab open, which at this club required both your driver's license and credit card. By the time I realized this, I was 25 miles away, with no hope of going back. I called another of my friends who was still there to close it for me. He called back to say that they didn't have my ID or credit card, but that the bartender had given him someone else's ID instead. He was pretty drunk, so I wasn't sure what was going on. I later called the club about 20 times and went back there, but no ID or credit card. I saw a woman litter right next to a trash can, and I was walking behind her. As I thought I was out of her peripherals, I picked up the trash and threw it away. She apparently saw me and for some unknown reason became belligerent as if I had just insulted her. She then proceeded to try and hand me more trash whilst exclaiming fairly irately that if litter bothered me so much, I should throw it all away. One of the weirdest encounters in my life. So here is my story. It was Christmas Eve night a few years back in Kansas City, Missouri. There was a considerable snowfall and the city was having one of our worst winters in years. I was leaving my girl's house around 11 p.m., who lived about 8 minutes away from where I stayed. Normally, this would be a quick zip down Blue Park and I would be home, but there was already about 2.5 inches of snow, and my car was a beater, but I was managing. As I'm heading down the road, I see a guy and his kid, I crap you not, without a coat, standing in front of a car in a liquor store parking lot. Now, I could give two craps, honestly. If an adult got himself in trouble normally, I would keep going. But I honestly felt bad for the kid, and he had to be cold with no coat and all. So anyhow, I pull up and ask him if he needs a jump. "Nah, dog, I got a bad starter. It screws up when it's cold," the man replies. After I figure out it's nothing I can help with, I ask if he would like me to call someone. "Nah, homie, but if you could give me a ride to my house, that'd be cool as hell." His street was about 3 streets back down the road, so I figure no big deal. Him and his kid huddle in the car. At this point, I notice the man reeks of marijuana and is probably high. Now, the important thing to remember in this story is that the main street I was on was an emergency snow route, meaning it had been pre-treated and the plows had already run through it. This, of course, makes the snow at the entrances to side streets higher and a bit more packed, a fact I hadn't really considered until I turned into his street and I got my front 2 tires stuck completely in snow. When it was clear I was stuck and couldn't go forwards or backwards, the man said, "Ah, crap, my bad, man. My house is pretty close from here. Good looking out, though," and then proceeded to get out of my car and walk to his front door. A front door I could see from my car that was stuck. He did not offer to help me get my car unstuck, not that we could with the 2 of us, nor did he offer to let me come in and wait for a tow truck. I ended up spending Christmas morning that year hanging out at a 7-Eleven for about 6.5 hours waiting on a tow truck. A friend of mine was walking down the street late at night when he saw a man lying in an alleyway. The guy looked as though he'd been hurt really bad and was asking for help. My friend approached him to find out how badly he had been hurt and what he needed to do. When he did, a bunch of guys ambushed him, beat the crap out of him, and stole all his money. The whole thing had been a setup just to lure him into a vulnerable situation. It's freaking terrible to take advantage of someone else's kindness like that. I read a story of a man driving in the middle of the night on a street surrounded by cornfields when he saw a man laying in the street ahead, not moving. He contemplated helping, but ultimately decided he should find help ahead to play it safe. He carefully drove around the body and slowly drove off, and when he looked in his rear mirror, he saw the body stand up and slink away into the cornfields. Most likely, there was an ambush waiting. It's truly sad that the moral of a lot of these seems to be, don't help people who look like they're in need. I would hope that we can refine it to assess the situation, but I guess we know that isn't always possible in the heat of the moment. Gave a one-eyed homeless guy $5. He wandered off, apparently telling other homeless guys his good fortune. Homeless guys began melting out of the scenery, asking for their $5. I realized my mistake at that point and stopped being generous. They apparently turned their anger on one eye and stabbed him for his $5. I found out when questioned by police. Reminds me of an incident in high school. We used to drive down to a liquor store in Newark, New Jersey, to buy beer. There was always a crowd of homeless outside, and you'd frequently get back to your car to find a bum going through your ashtray for change and such. Anyway, the biggest of the homeless guys was Daryl. For the price of one beer, Daryl would watch your car and even escort you back to make sure no one hassled you. Well, one time, a buddy feels bad for Daryl and throws him $5. That was it. The price of going for beer went from one Meisterbrow, $5 per 12-pack, to $5. Being that a 12-pack and a pack of smokes totaled $7.50, this was an unacceptable tax. A new, disreputable liquor store had to be located. I was walking to the garage through the main lobby of the hospital I work at, I'm a nurse, and saw a woman sprawled across the floor with her family around her. I ran over to help and asked, "Are you okay?" Good lord. This woman sits straight up and starts screaming.
Did she just ask if I'm okay? Did she just ask me if I'm okay?
and proceeds to throw punches at me. They all missed even though I was in WTF mode. Apparently she just found out a family member passed away and had fallen to the ground from shock. I had two good friends who dated for a very long time and fought like miserable spouses. We all know that couple. So they finally break up and the dude has to move out. I didn't want to get involved in their messy breakup, so I declined him when he asked to stay with me. Fast forward a few days and he gets kicked out of his friend's house, who lives with his mum, and can't go home to his parents because of his new job. So I begrudgingly say yes because I know I would hope for the same generosity in that position. A few weeks go by with no drama, and then I have to go out of town for 2 weeks. I'm glad to have someone watch the apartment. My landlord calls me a few days later saying my shower leaked and flooded the downstairs apartment, causing over $2,000 in damage to both my apartment and the downstairs one. My friend denies the whole thing, will not admit he did anything wrong, and also refuses to help me pay for it. I got kicked out, never got my security, and had to pay an additional $1,000 because of a clause in the lease saying it was my responsibility to maintain all plumbing. I let another driver get in front of me in the fast lane when I could have sped up and blocked him. He sped up to about 80 miles per hour, and a half-mile down the road from me, he rear-ended a car that blew a tire and wrecked. I did not check the news to see if anyone had died, and never will. A lawyer friend of mine represented a guy pulled over for speeding or something, who was asked by the officer, "Do you have any firearms?" The man responds honestly, "Well, I have one locked up at home, but not on me." Turns out, since the time he legally purchased and registered his firearm, Congress had passed a law making it a federal felony for anyone ever convicted of domestic assault to own or possess a firearm. Problem is, even though the Commonwealth had a list of people convicted of domestic assault and a list of people with registered firearms, nobody let our guy know that when he answered this question a bit too honestly, he was confessing to a federal felony with a minimum sentence of 5 years in the pen. My laptop had just died when I found a MacBook Pro at a park with no one around to claim it. I hung around the laptop for half an hour and no one came forward. I tried to find the owner, but it was password protected and I didn't want to mess with it. My wife, being the ethical angel on my shoulder, convinced me to turn it in with the caveat that I could keep it if no one claimed it. I took it to the police station. Before I handed it over, I asked about their found property policy, and the desk person said, 90 days, and if it isn't claimed, it's yours. Sweet, I might get a free laptop without the guilt of stealing it from someone. So I went to my car and got the laptop and turned it in. The detective saw the laptop and said, "Oh, not computers. We destroy those after 90 days. Gosh darn it." Haha, well, I do understand the policy for the sake of protecting the data and info of the owners, but still a major bummer. I walked out of a bar and saw a man and woman assaulting a homeless man. The homeless guy was about 5'4" and about 110 pounds, and he was already down on his knees. The man and woman were both Samoan from their looks, so they were big. Very big. She was about 6'1" and about 220 pounds, and her male companion was really, really big, about 6'5" and over 300 pounds. I ran up to them and told them to stop, which was a really big mistake on my part. I should have just yelled police or something to get them to stop, but hindsight is 20/20. The woman came after me and her friend tried to flank me, which is super dangerous for me at this point. I'm 5'10" and 200 pounds and can handle myself, but this is quickly becoming something I cannot handle. I pulled my knife before she could get to me, and her friend could get behind me. Her big companion saw that I was not fricking around now, and that I will not go down without a serious fight. As a side note here to anyone who is assaulted, never go down in a street fight. You're defenseless and can easily be very, very hurt, crippled, or killed. Real life is not the movies, and people do not stop beating you because you're defenseless. On with the story. The big Samoan guy grabbed her and held her and said that I had a knife and to let me leave, and I do. I walk/jog the hell out of there, and I'm about a block away when I hear a loud yell. As I spin around, I see the woman running full speed at me, and I have just enough time to get my hands up and spin her into the street, and her boyfriend about 50 yards behind her at full run towards me also. She starts swinging at me hard, not like some dainty girl, but really trying to knock me out. Remember, she outweighs me by 20 pounds, and I have her huge guy friend now barreling down on me from behind. I decide to knock her out, and I unload everything I have into her jaw. She goes down instantly and is out cold. I turn to face her boyfriend, who is now about 10 yards away, and I see him just stop cold and look at her laying in the street. He just walks past me and picks up her head and looks at me. At this very moment, some guys who saw me basically just knock some girl out without any context yell something and start running toward me. They're about a block away. The big Samoan guy looks at me with a really sad expression like he's really sorry for everything and just says, "Run." And I do. I fricking run like someone is trying to kill me because those guys who saw me hit her are fricking coming to kick my butt, and there are a bunch of them. I run to my car and I get the heck out of there. I get away, and I have never told a single person about this incident until right now. I have never been so scared as I was that night. My best friend was going through a messy breakup with his girlfriend. She was teed off, so she stole a whole bunch of his clothes and his cat and drove off to her apartment. We jumped in my car and gave chase. She pulled into her apartment complex and parked before realizing we were behind her, so I pulled up behind her and blocked her car in. She started screaming at me to move my car, and I said, "Frick no," while my friend called the cops. He had had the cat for 8 years and was desperately attached to it. He had only had the girlfriend for 2 years. The cops get there and they talk to everyone. They figure out the situation, they tell the girlfriend to return the cat and the clothes. Then an officer comes over to me and says he's considering arresting me for false imprisonment. My fricking jaw dropped. Normally I'm super respectful and cool with the cops, but it was just too much for me to swallow. Are you kidding me right now? Not at all. You put your car behind hers, making it impossible for her to leave. You kept her there against her will, and that's a crime. She could have gotten out of the car and walked away at any time. I was only stopping her from fleeing the scene with stolen property. Oh, are you a police officer now? Is that your job? I stare at him sullenly, a look of, "You can't be frickin' serious," on my face. I guess we don't do anything at this time, but next time you shouldn't get involved in disputes like this. It's a matter for the police, and you should leave it up to us. God, what a fricking mess that night was. I offered my seat to an elderly lady in the bus. Turns out she wasn't that old and felt offended, so she screamed at me. At which point you tell her to F off and say, "Fine, I guess you don't deserve any courtesy," and proceed to sit back down. Almost the same thing happened to me. Old lady didn't scream at me, but she said in a very catty tone, "Don't think you're doing anything special." But she did sit down in my place. I have fallen prey for this one before. Folks, you should still do it anyway. Just brush off the annoying prideful ones who scream at you for trying to be decent. Or, as another commenter puts it, kick her in the shins. Old ladies have weak bones. When I was young, I was able to save money very well. No bank or anything, just a wooden box under my bed that used to hold dominoes. Every week I would cash my paycheck, put the vast majority in the box, and keep a little pocket money for myself. When I was 18, I worked at a video store. Everyone who worked there were very good friends. One day, we were told by our boss, a really great guy named Drew, that he had come down with stomach cancer. I talked to him afterwards and was sad to hear that the store's terrible insurance was causing Drew to have to choose between treatments or paying his rent. Drew was gay and his family had disowned him, so he had no help. I thought about it for a few days and decided I would help him out. I agreed to loan him money so that he could pay his rent. He would pay me back when able and everything would be great. I gave him $3,000 I had saved since I was 12. A little over 3 actually, but who's counting, right? Cut to 5 months later, I come to work to see Drew being dragged out by police. Turns out he had a massive white powder problem and had been stealing from the store. He was such a good guy, I actually fought for him at work for a month or so until I saw the evidence. I also learned that he had never had cancer. It was a scam that he had used on several friends of his, so he and his boyfriend could get high. I've never been able to get back to where I was financially. I'm not sure what changed. Maybe because I got a bank account. Maybe emotionally it messed me up. I'm not sure. I have $60 to my name now. One thing is for sure, I have never trusted people the same since. Not sure anything will be able to give me that back. In the 7th grade, gave a choking girl the Heimlich maneuver, saved her life. No one else knew how, and was suspended for 5 days for sexual harassment. Her parents tried to sue, but it went nowhere. You've got to be kidding me. Weren't there any faculty present that saw it? Or was it the girl who claimed harassment? The security said I was rubbing myself on her or something. The girl was thankful, her parents were the really upset ones. The school blew it out of proportion. A work friend of mine was going through a nasty divorce. Even though it wasn't finalized, he was seeing another woman at work on the down low, but everyone at the office had suspicions. Having dealt with divorce before, I sent him an email explaining that people were talking and he may want to be more discreet so as to not exacerbate things with his divorce. He told the down low girl what I had said. She told me to mind my business. I explained over and over again that I meant well and it was nothing against her. She convinced him not to talk to me anymore and we haven't spoken since. My wife and I were flying from Montreal to Vienna 2 years ago. We were flying coach, so of course we're the last aboard. I see a lady sleeping in the waiting room at the gate. Good Samaritan that I like to think I am, I gently wake her and ask if she's going to Vienna. She says that, yes, she is, so I tell her that it's final boarding. Away we go, and she gets on behind us. As we're taking our seats, she goes by us and we smell the alcohol vapors. Oh no. Anyway, we get our seatbelts on and they start pushing the plane out to the taxiway. The flight attendants go through the cabin, checking seatbelts. But when they get to the drunk lady, they can't wake her up. So, overcome all the flight attendants, shaking her, trying to wake her up. Finally, they start calling for a doctor on the flight. Someone speaks up and is a nurse. They try and fail. So, back the plane goes to the gate, on come the EMS and haul her out. 2 hours later, we're sitting at the gate while they try to find her luggage to pull off the flight. I sank deep into my seat and hoped like heck no one saw me wake her up to get on the flight. My friends in college had to kill and dissect mice. There were way too many etherized mice for the class, so they got the leftover little dude and carefully revived him, gave him water, stroked his fur, and took him outside and released him on the lawn outside the cafeteria. Free crumbs for life. He made it several yards before a bird swooped down and grabbed him. I saved a bird that was stuck in a fence. It was a wooden privacy fence, and the bird had managed to get its head stuck in between 2 boards on the fence. All I had to do was grab the bird and lift it up above the boards. Anyway, it pooped on me. Office workers. What's your best office story? Used to work with a fairly large woman. Every winter she would catch a cold and hack and cough and just have a rough go of it. She would have these horrible coughing fits to the point where we thought she might pass out. One day she had a horrible coughing fit and peed herself. That night the carpet cleaners came in, pushed all of the office chairs into a back room and shampooed the rugs. Everyone came in the next day to find their chairs in a room and no one knew which chair was which. Everyone spent the day standing or sniffing their chair to see if they had the pee chair. The big lady was actually pretty dang nice and she went on to lose a bunch of weight, ditch her loser husband, and have a great life. So there's a happy ending there. Came into work, I was the early manager, and before I get to my desk, my phone is ringing. Answer it and it's an employee. All he says is, "I have to go, I'm bleeding from my butt." Stunned, I say, yeah, you should leave. I walk to his cube and find a blood-soaked chair with bloody napkins all over it. I ask if he wants to call 911 or something, and he says, "No, I'm driving myself." I call maintenance and I have to explain to them and upper management how all this blood appeared. Guy ended up okay and came back to work a couple of days later. Never asked what the heck the issue was. That's a bleeding hemorrhoid. Not that you really probably wanted to know. The chair was soaked. It was a lot of blood. I asked if everything was good after the fact, and he said it was, and nothing to worry about for other people. I speak from experience. Not quite that bad, but it lasted for days and bled clear through my pants and left a large stain on my seat at its worst. Went to the ER. The doctor acted like I was a big wimp and wasting his time. He then forces a golf ball-sized blood clot out of my butt. So pretty much not a big deal and nothing a person would ever want to discuss with another living soul. I work in a public library, which combines all the joy of customer service and office work. Usually it's just people calling to get phone numbers verified, but there's a few who call for life advice, including, "How many calories are in rye bread versus whole bread? Do I need to water my cactus today? I updated Firefox and now I don't like it. How do I go back to the old version? What day this weekend will traffic be bad?" Personal all-time favorite caller goes to the woman who called to ask me what fellatio technique geishas performed. I guess there is a tendency to automatically think that librarians must read a lot and therefore know more. As far as I know, that particular job is about storage and data entry, but this sure is a funny assumption. I work at a factory back office, watching over incoming and outgoing materials, and general material management. We had a shipping container come in from the States, transporting several big bags of sugar and milk powder mixture. We crack open the container, and much to our surprise, we find a cat. Bear in mind, this container spent a solid week or two at sea. The cat was alive. Apparently, it survived by eating the powder. So I did the old screenshot the desktop, hide desktop icons, and save the screenshot as the new desktop background. To 3 different computers, 2 of which were shared between 5 to 10 people. Now the problem was, I called in sick with food poisoning the next day. Utter chaos broke out. No one could open any programs. IT had to get involved, and it apparently took them a few hours to figure out what had happened. No one ever knew it was me, and I had planned on, taking the credit and winning that stage of the prank war. But no, I played dumb and bit my tongue. My current office building was once a funeral home that had sat vacant for a number of years after the previous owner shot himself in the apartment upstairs. When we first moved into the office, there was a wall panel that was accidentally knocked out in the basement. There were about 30 people worth of ashes hidden in the wall. I have one. We have an agent. Let's call him Joe. Joe is about 60 and the perfect employee. Never misses work, perfect stats, honest, customers love him and always give him praise. Volunteers for overtime and absolutely everybody loves him. I use his calls as examples in my training class. He's been offered numerous management positions, but he's perfectly content sitting at home, fixing customers' problems, making them happy, and making our company money. He is an absolute machine. 2 years ago, his wife and his 40th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I had a business trip to Ohio for a new system training. Joe was told that he had to come with me to learn. He pleaded that he couldn't because he would miss his wedding anniversary. Plus it was odd because agents never go on trips, and my manager said sternly, "Do it, Joe. You don't have a choice." Joe of course went home and packed up and got ready to leave a few days later. His wife said she was going to stay with her sisters while he was gone and left the night before. Our company car picked me up from the airport and we headed to Joe's. He was pretty upset and depressed but tried to be upbeat. We went to dinner and stalled for a few hours, for good reason, and when we got to the airport we boarded our plane and headed to Houston for a switch. We got to Houston and we walked up to the Miami gate and I said, "There's your plane." He looked up and I pointed over to his wife standing at the gate. My boss had arranged to send them to Miami for a week and then on a cruise to Jamaica for their anniversary with my boss's company credit card for expenses. The first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh my God, I didn't pack for that." But of course we had his wife take care of that when we sent her out on an earlier flight. He started crying right there in the airport and hugged me. I handed him the credit card and went over to his wife, gave her a hug and told her she owed me some apple cookies. So bomb. And headed to my plane for Ohio. Went to Ohio and... yeah, Ohio. We had a Phil Collins day to screw with a co-worker who professed to hating Genesis. Months after revealing their hatred, the president of the company had the IT company stay after everyone left to absolutely cover this person in Phil Collins's face, and I heart Phil signs in celebration of Phil Collins's birthday. It was practically a holiday and very little work was accomplished as a result. Pretty much the best day at the office ever. I love this because of everyone getting involved and because of my not-so-secret appreciation for Phil Collins. Sounds like a fun place to work. Will this be an annual event? I think my favorite part of this is the casual disregard for the IT department and the rest of the office, making them their own prank monkeys. A guy at my office had a fishing rod along the ceiling. He had the hook positioned over a man's head. We'll call the man Dave. Every so often he dropped the hook, which has a little weight, onto Dave's head and then quickly pulled the cord so the hook is back up to the ceiling and isn't visible. This is going on months and the guy who was being pranked didn't have a clue. He went to the doctor for tests because it felt like a throb to his head, so he worried something was really wrong. When we told him what was happening, he couldn't stop laughing at himself. Dave's revenge was pretty sweet. He did the deed with the prankster's sister. "Oh, I really thought there was something wrong with me. I guess you learn something new about yourself every day. You got me, guys. I'm going to penetrate your sister." OP thought the question said, "Best orifice story." I got this job a few years back. In the first week, I was blown away at the technical ineptitude of the whole darn place. Our job requires a lot of scanning, usually large stacks of bank statements, 100 to 200 pages at a time. And the people who I worked with and for, more often than not, needed to scan things that were front to back. How they did this blows my mind to this day. Step 1. Flip the whole stack upside down so the reverse side was ready to scan. Step 2. Make a copy of every back side. Step 3. Take the reverse side and place it just behind its front side so that it would be page 1, copy of page 2, page 3, copy of page 4, etc. Step 4. Scan the whole stack face up. The amount of paper they wasted was unbelievable. That's the day I became a genius by showing them our enterprise-level scanner could scan front and back simultaneously with the push of 2 buttons. This is also when I became partly responsible for every IT issue in the office, despite having IT members on staff at all times. 10 minutes into the company meeting, someone's phone went off playing bagpipe music. But as it got louder, we realized it was an actual set of bagpipes playing outside. Before we knew it, the guy marches into the conference room, blasting away that one Scottish song. I don't know what it's called, but you know the one I mean. After he finished playing, the speaker, who had been playing dumb until now, announced that we had just acquired a small company in Scotland. Best announcement ever. I worked with a guy we called Irish Jeff. We were on the sales team and he will call customers and start singing "Oh Danny Boy" until the phone rings. When the customer answers and asks if he was singing, he will say, "Well, I am Irish." He will then talk to them for 45 minutes about his Irish heritage and the names of the boats that originally brought people over from Ireland, without letting them off the phone. He doesn't really ever talk about anything he's supposed to be selling. He was born and raised in Texas. We call them plastic paddies in Ireland. They annoy us as much as they annoy you. This was at my last job, a call center on National Donut Day at Krispy Kreme. Girl A had gotten a box of donuts and was on a call with a customer. Girl B comes up and takes one out of the box. Girl A mutes her phone and says, "B-word, you had better be joking. Don't touch my donuts." Girl B turns around and walks away with the donut. Girl A hangs up on her customer and full-on assaults Girl B. An epic brawl breaks out right in the middle of the call floor, and they even crash through the giant partition that separates our call center from another company's, which is actually all in the same giant room. At some point, a knife tumbles out of one of their purses. No one actually pulled it out or tried to use it, but it did fall out. Management has everyone end their calls and clear the floors out. Cops are called and both girls are escorted out, never to be seen there again. Because donuts. I swear to God this is true. I worked in a staffing company as a recruiter. One of the sales guys always bragged about his martial arts skills. One afternoon, one of the female recruiters called bullcrap on him. They were right outside my cubicle. He says something to the effect of, "Oh, don't believe me? I will kick my foot right over your head right now. Stand here, just like this." He positions her and then he gets in a karate squat, I don't know how else to describe that pose, and goes for it without any stretching, practice, or anything. He rotates and kicks his foot way up, just high enough to make solid contact with her right temple with a solid thud. She staggers a bit dazed and he runs and hides in his cube. I couldn't believe what I just saw. It happened so quick. It was insane. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if the individual is Michael Scott for the audacity and irresponsibility or Dwight Schrute for the martial arts. Maybe some kind of freak hybrid. We call her the Runner. Call center rep was going to be fired for refunding fees that had never been charged. She was essentially just giving away money because she couldn't figure anything out. About halfway to the conference room, she figures out what's happening. As such, she comes to a dead stop and refuses to keep going. She keeps asking her manager, "Johnny, are you going to fire me?" Of course he can't confirm since he's still in the middle of the floor, so he tells her he just wants to be able to have a conversation in private. She keeps asking and he keeps not answering. Eventually, she just turns around and takes off for her desk. Johnny is standing there for about 10 minutes trying to decide between going after her or continuing to the conference room where his boss is waiting for them. He finally decides on the conference room. Johnny is a pretty large guy and his boss is a chain smoker. After the boss knows what happened, they take off running over to her desk and the other rep tells them that she left. They then sprint down into the parking lot. Just as they get to the doors, they see her car pulling onto the street. They hung out for about 5 minutes to catch their breath. When they got back, Johnny called corporate HR, and they let him know that the rep had already called Aetna to file for a leave of absence. She got fired anyway. A girl I worked with, married, was screwing the boss, also married. They stayed after hours for weeks to do their thing in his office. For some reason, she opened up to me about this, even though we weren't friends, and she included the fact that he prematurely arrives all the time. So anytime he's being a butthole, I just picture that and I feel better. This morning, I found a bloody glove in my desk drawer, and Jim Halpert tried to convince me I committed murder. I think he may be the real murderer. My coworker was out of town for an office pancake breakfast. In her absence, we decided to make her a breakfast plate. We ended up making a Vitruvian man made of sausages on a Royal Chenet plate and hiding it in her office. She found it, and then the Vitruvian man began to travel office to office. It was sealed with tape, but that didn't stop it from starting to go moldy. The Vitruvian man was hidden in desk drawers, under paper piles, behind coats. I knew it was my turn for the Vitruvian man to end up on my office, but when I got in, I couldn't find it anywhere. Later in the day, one of our VPs came in to meet me with a serious matter. He asks me a question, and I'm thinking of my response. I look up. There on the ceiling, Mission Impossible style, is a moldy man made of sausages with its taped-on smiley face looking down at me. I awkwardly carried on the conversation with the VP through random laughter which didn't make sense to him. I had to throw out the plate after that. In total, we had it moving around the office for about a month. We've had a couple of good prank wars over the years. Best thing that comes to mind quickly is when we changed a guy's phone autocorrect to replace the full stop with a question mark. He was very confused for days. I also tied all the cables of a guy's computer together under his desk with a zap strap. Monitors, mouse, keyboard, phone, etc. I then hooked that bundle of cables to the lever under his chair that controlled the up-down position and turned the chair so that it was at its 90-degree angle. He came to his desk after lunch and sat down, grabbed a hold of his desk like he normally does to turn his chair, and spun to face his computer. The entire desk was pulled into the rear corner of his cubicle. It made a lot of noise, but not as much as he did swearing. I changed the guy's autocorrect to change the to the fricking. He could not type, so he was always looking down at his keys and depending on words to catch any mistakes. Needless to say, he turned in documentation like, I called the fricking customer and they told me that the fricking software was not functioning correctly. Clearly, I've switched the word fricking for the actual word that this particular prankster used. Here are some more office pranks. I changed people's autocorrect to say, I'm pooping instead of hey. Another one, change work to the brothel. And the best, change beer to fun butt stuff. I'm pooping. Super busy day at the brothel today. In desperate need of fun butt stuff. I did this to my business partner's computer as a joke and went on holiday. He never proofreads anything, so when I got back, I walked into a massive crap storm. He still thinks his computer caught a virus, and if he ever finds out the truth, he will murder-suicide us both. 10 out of 10. Totally worth it. The only funny thing was the time I placed an ad in the paper saying, monkeys for sale, $50 with his number. That's a whole nother story. You'd be surprised at how many people want cheap monkeys. There are many phantom crapper stories out there where someone drops a deuce in the bathroom floor or shower. But at one of my Navy commands, we actually had someone take a crap in the coffee pot, and then run the coffee machine, fill up the pot, and leave it there for people. Luckily, someone smelled it before they tried to drink it. They never caught the guy. We had a general office questionnaire one day. Questions like, do you like your job? Do you feel listened to? Or have you been harassed at work? One person filed in yes to that last question. Massive panic within the company followed. Protocols were set up, meetings held, experts hired, and our team managers took each and every one of us separately and asked us with concern and kindness in their eyes, was it you? Did anyone hurt you? It was John. He and Fred were good friends, and always slapping each other on the butt or poking each other in the side, especially when on the phone and with a customer. He had filled in yes for a laugh because technically he was slapped on the butt. He got to explain that to the company president and was sacked shortly after. I think it's more screwed up to do an anonymous questionnaire and then ask people what they answered. Really poor ethics. Good luck to the management if they ever try to get straight answers on future surveys. They don't want straight answers, they want a paper that says everything is perfect. If doing crap like that means that people will lie next time, rather than mention any actual concerns, then that's all the better for them. Two middle-aged women, late 40s, grey hair, mom jeans, got into a fight at the office. I won't use their real names. I don't remember the context of the fight, but Deb went into Stephanie's office and closed the door, and there was a little bit of shouting and then a thud. The door flies open just in time for me to see Stephanie throwing a punch. They yell at each other in the lobby, and one of them actually says, "Let's take this outside." So they do. Some of the younger guys in the office went after them and had to break them up in the parking lot. Only one of them got fired, and they offered me her job a few days later. So I had this coworker who got a hold of the office's emergency air horn. She would sneak up behind people and blast it right in their ear. Most had a heart attack. She was really good at being sneaky with it too, and you'd be working away, have no idea, and she'd be like right under your fricking desk, and then that gosh darn air horn. Were there not huge consequences for blowing the emergency air horn to prank people? On the one hand, this is hilarious. On the other hand, I would absolutely not tolerate it in my workspace. I think the tension of not knowing where the next toot was coming from would destroy my sanity. Our office was centrally controlled by a head office in another city. There was a massive transformer explosion knocking out all the systems and controls in the head office. Essentially, no work could get done, no customers could get to us, we couldn't even cool the building down. Mid-August was 35+ degrees Celsius outside. So we had to send everyone home for about 3 days, and only essential staff stayed. I was in HR, so I was one of them. Slowly started to build up staff as we were getting closer to operation. Ended up working about 110 hours, including sleeping there. Working, however, is a very loose term. Since no PCs could run anything, we sat and watched TV, played board games and poker, played a ping pong tournament, and in our break room we had NES, SNES, and Sega. We ended up playing Super Spike Volleyball Tournament, an NES Ice Hockey Tournament, which I won, and an Excite Bike Tournament. One of the guys who had to stay on through the night played through Zelda. In conclusion, Explosion got me 70 hours of overtime while winning NES Ice Hockey Tournament with all the skinny players. Oh boy, do I have a good one. I was an intern at the time. Summer of 2013, I'm interning at a pharmaceutical/biotech company, and was meeting the team. There was this particular guy, white guy, mid-40s, on the team who I had lunch with on a daily basis. We talked about what I was studying in school at the time, and how I wanted to travel the world for a bit after graduation, instead of just going straight to a 9-to-5 office life. He got deeply depressed when I said so, and started saying he's been doing this 9-to-5 thing for 20 years. He's like 45. And what I said to him really made him wake up. I'm in my head like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Fast forward 2 days later, I'm finishing up training modules assigned to me, and all of a sudden, one of the HR ladies walks over to the manager's cube and explains that he quit. No 2 weeks' notice. And my manager bolts up and yells in disbelief, "He what? Please repeat what you just said. He went to Taiwan to find himself?" I'm trying to connect the dots to see if I, the lowly intern, had really said some things to stir up an employee to quit his job and travel the world. I didn't tell my manager the conversation I'd had with him, but I did tell one of the girls that I worked with, and that's when I started my journey of an office fling. But that's a story for another day. In conclusion, I had a casual conversation as an intern with an employee about my aspirations to travel the world after I graduate. Probably made the employee quit, don't know if it was coincidence or not, but I think the conversation stirred his actions.
Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit. What are your experiences, funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia, not safe for work? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it, and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him, "Yep, both of them." And he said, "Both? Aw, you guys are great." Not hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his headator to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. He wanted to kiss you. I hate this comment. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam, he was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the entire restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not the doctor or the nurse, but I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cued the following conversation. "Why are the Rugrats on?" "You woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats." "We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." "Why did I want to be angry?" "You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in the bed of the hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, so they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, "You're snoring, roll over," and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been in a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Hold up, I'm talking about this. I am ranting about this right now. Why do people feel the need to put etc. in places that it doesn't belong? It's one item and it's not even part of a list. If you have more than 3 things to say, you can put etc. at the end of it and have it make sense. But if you say, "I was in a place, etc., that's only one place. Etc. means and so on, and so forth, and the rest, etc. Redditors, learn to English. Now we can move on. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit and lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right here," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mom was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my sack is itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my sack. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down an excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours, and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mum, they shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time, it was a serious issue. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old, 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a freaking sloth in here. How do we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep and I yelled, "Whoa there, Missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire sauce." No, wait, that's not a cool name. "My name is Shark." Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his woohoo in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth chief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." 2 stories. 1, I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day every day, so she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now," and she mouthed okay, and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2, I was in helping with the heart procedure, and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the chest compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, sorry, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1, going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no, and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." 2, still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." But back in the bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair amount of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks, says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I mean, he's not wrong. Kind of a W. I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth taken out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them, and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. "Let's get you in a wheelchair. I got it, baby." Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. "Oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea." Tries to stand, but slams into wall and slides down face first. "Oh no!" She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a drug stupor? Heck yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. Came out of anesthetic, and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse, not so amused. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep." Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about it, he didn't believe us, so we asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse, ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid, 14 or 15. We're talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk. Kind of kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, i.e. not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms, etc., we don't need to have this discussion again, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed, and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow, and his mom just looks mortified in the 2 to 3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some." His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl, and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months, we would give that guy lick emotions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers in his locker, etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something, standing at the desk, and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he's been fishing. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface the story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl-next-door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with the yum-yum juice that made me forget everything that happened, although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened, and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions, and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. TLDR, yum-yum juice made me say dirty things to the doctor, change doctors, and consider moving out of state due to my humiliation. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us, and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy!" Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a chorusman's butt and hung on for dear life, who was the woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR, grabbed a girl's butt in the OR, got nicknamed by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit. My top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my gourd on drugs. Wonderful. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big woohoo." I've had a vasectomy, so this one is especially funny to me since they usually only use localized numbing agents. Unless he got a special doctor, that comment was 100% him. I woke up in a recovery room after having my wisdom teeth out, and no one was in there with me, so I thought it'd be a good idea to get up and have a look around. Apparently, I had been awake a minute before and asked the doctor for some water, but when she left to get it, I went in and out of consciousness and forgot all about it. They were pretty terrified when I just up and vanished. A few months later, my brother had his wisdom teeth out. We left the surgeons with no issue, but on the drive home, my brother lost his mind. I had to take a circuitous route home because my brother wanted to see the circus. Every house we drove past, he was pointing out imaginary animals and giggling hysterically. He was 17 at the time. Anesthesia apparently does weird stuff to us. While not medical, I was a prison officer doing an escort for and handcuffed to a prisoner having a minor procedure done under general anesthetic. After the procedure, he starts waking up and chatting about stuff. Then he starts telling me about his mobile phone he had smuggled in, the make and model, and how he keeps it plugged in his butt. Edit for those asking, I completed a security report and submitted it to the prison police department, I forget the names, and, as with the prisoner I saw swallowing drugs smuggled in, nothing happened. It was a small think phone. I think it was the Samsung Juke around 10 years ago, a finger from a latex glove to wrap it. I've been under anesthesia several times over the last 3 years, and no, I'm not a doctor or nurse either. The most recent time, however, I went in for an outpatient procedure where a stent was placed into a ureter, tube that leads to kidney. They go through your urethra to put it in, hence the anesthesia. Anyhow, it took more than the normal dose to put me under, and my wife later told me that when I came to, I was playing with myself and asking her if she wanted to take a ride to make sure this thing still works before we get out of here. The nurse was there at the time also. My wife told me she attempted to keep me covered for the nurse's sake, but I wasn't having it. I have no recollection of those events. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist, I was gone, and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid, and I started yelling, "Liquid!" a la Snake. Apparently, I almost caused my mom to crash the car, and it quickly became annoying very fast, as one can imagine. Just coming out of surgery, and the nurse says, "I'm going to take your temperature now," to which I respond, "Will you give it back?" I'm not the medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago, and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different, and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the heck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room, but after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too, a bunch of family and everyone from the office, and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing that I can think of is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gorked him finally worked its way out of his system. Thank you for the new verb, to gork. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently, I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was, "Fine, Gran, I'm high as giraffe balls."
What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or a mass quitting? All the engineers at one job I was in had their contracts changed so that they had to buy their own tools. Due to the specialist nature of our jobs, we were all looking at over £4,000 per engineer. 10 walked and the rest threatened to strike. The boss had to give in and buy the tools himself. They had their contracts changed? I'm not an expert, but isn't that illegal? Probably yes, but the boss was such a butt, he felt he could do as he pleased with his servants. Many times he would just have the engineers working on Christmas Day. If you complained about it, he would just tell you to stop whining or get another job. One poor sod was made to work the day his wife went into labor, and he missed the birth of his child. He wasn't even allowed to phone the hospital. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It had giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock and clay, and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put it into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total about 40 people that day were fired, and I was put on another crew. Man, that's gotta suck if you were simply the guy holding the stop or slow sign that day. The idea is probably that everyone on the crew has a responsibility to be aware of what's going on and notice egregious errors. Not sure that it's reasonable in this particular case, but it might be. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted that they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit and the majority were outside with signs the next days, until eventually they switched it almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. I didn't quit and I actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. I don't know what changed in your life to make you not enjoy pickles anymore. Perhaps having a wealth of them to eat at any given times. Anyway, hope you recover, strange pickle man. I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments. Fired them all, only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight. But it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out and resumes don't come flooding in. They are still trying to recover. I tried this with my dog. Haven't seen him in 2 years. Next time, don't pee on the floor, Baxter. Please come back. Worked in a bar in a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus barbacks. Thought something was weird about our credit card tips. Went to the bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks, examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as heck. Owner comes in to see how things are going. Bar manager confronts him. Owner denies wrongdoing, claims what he's doing is legal. It wasn't, he was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says, TS. Bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the other bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff join us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the bullcrap. Left over 500 people in the club with no bar staff. 0 Fs given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Screw that guy. I was working retail and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and they vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, was never around when anybody needed him, and was generally a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends have just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get the carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. So-and-so told me that you wanted me to get the carts." Manager, knowing the kid has a record as a really poor employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, manager notices that we're completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimanded this kid and sent him to the lot. So he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day. Sits down with HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling illicit substances to employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. Then goes outside and calls the manager phone and leaves a message that he's going to F him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management at everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you substances? Have you ever seen him sell someone else substances? Have you ever seen him use substances? Have you ever heard him talk about using substances? No, no, no. And everyone they talk to points the finger at this disgruntled ex-employee. Everyone knows he started the rumor mill going to try and get back at his manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left on work cell, but they dismiss it because there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They don't have any solid evidence against him, but this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Well, no crap, they hang out every day and these interviews lasted almost a week. Enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Screw this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started. Here's my keys." About half the employees on staff walked right out there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Does anyone else who's ever worked a bad hospitality or retail job get the vicarious sense of joy out of these stories? Who am I kidding? You clicked the thumbnail for some sweet quitting fantasies. My mum used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mum to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman is introduced to her. And my mum's boss informed my mum she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mum was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and she couldn't quit, so she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mum in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset by the situation as well. One morning, my mum walks through the doors and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well. leaving them to hire and train all new people right before the fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mum quit, and they had the balls to call my mum and ask her back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. I was hired by a man who owned 3 pizza chain stores. I trained at one store, worked there for a few months when I found out he wanted me to transfer to a different store, and after a few weeks become the manager. Woohoo! Well, the new store, the current manager, every single day spent a few hours on the phone with her significant other, screaming and yelling and crying, right in front of customers. The employees would get high in the walk-in fridge. I'm not actually too bothered by that if they actually did any more work than the total minimum. So here I am, hired by the store owner, not the manager, who had hired all of her friends. They didn't like me, they called me a B-word, a goody two-shoes, they were absolutely right. I fired all of them except for one new girl that started the week before I did. It was a glorious moment, the most B-word moment of my life. Mother frickers won't help me mop the floor, you're fired. Our company was bought by a larger company. The sales and marketing team got a new boss. Within a few weeks of this first meeting with the new boss, 75% of the team quit. No one outside of the team knew why. A few months later, I met the new head of sales and marketing. He was insane. When one of the top sales guys put his 2 weeks notice in, he was escorted off the company property within an hour. The next guy who resigned was told that he had to work the rest of the week with no pay so he could transfer his accounts over. Someone in HR had to explain to him that this is slavery and illegal. In conclusion, the new boss was insane and tried to bring slavery back. Our general manager was fired, everyone loved him, and they brought in a new GM who took away ending times to shifts, so we had to stay until he said we could go, while most of us were college students trying to schedule classes. And he took away all of the employee perks, we even had to pay full price on a $1 sub day. Everyone quit. There were only 2 people working there 2 months later. I worked at Wendy's. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all the other shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacements. Turns out he hasn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit on the same day. Now the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally 4 to 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow, but wasn't a hotspot. 6 only usually hitting a few hours overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working all the time. This means he increased all of our hours as well, and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. I don't know if anyone else has had the boss that refuses to take a single step to solve the acknowledged problem in a workplace they promised to fix, but I have, and I still relish the day I shouted at them and walked out. Train company in Sweden. One day, many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence, overtime. The document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we come home early. Undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date on the document and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. No one got into any trouble from what I recall. It was from the higher-ups, and pretty much everyone else in administrative staff knew about it. Still, they hadn't quite anticipated the crap storm. Even telling people that it was an April Fool's joke to their faces didn't work. Oh wow, beautiful from a very watch the world burn kind of way. I worked in a call center and they got us all together on April 1st and told us they were going to lay off 20% of the workforce, and we all chuckled. It wasn't a joke. April 1st is the first day of the 3rd fiscal quarter, midpoint of the year. Please tell me someone got in deep crap for that first bad joke. We had something similar happen. One day we got a mail from some higher-ups that the reception desk would now only be open from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. Some people got upset, stating that it was freaking stupid, they can't run a company like this, until someone, me, pointed out that it was April 1st. People in the office calmed down, realizing they wouldn't do something that dumb. Plot twist, the next day, it wasn't a joke. They were serious. In a team of 30 IT consultants that had been working a big project for a couple of years, the standing offer that governed rates, etc. had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting company, middleman, was just a week away and we hadn't seen the paperwork, just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get to the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company would be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department had made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit. Other people yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. Yeah, right. But the damage was done. It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They had been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, "That 30% cut 6 months ago was nasty, eh?" Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge. His first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days notice to move, with no moving compensation, or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement, and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic and said, "What are we supposed to do? No one can fill your job here, and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus, the company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 days after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. "You're not a team player," he shouts as he upends his team's lives on a whim for his own personal comfort. My goodness. Competing company in a similar but not identical line of business tried for years to replicate our product with no success. They scrapped the project and took the R&D money and bought our company instead. Fired 600 people in 1 day. I was one of them. I hear from those who remained the place is awful now. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million-dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw this as an opportunity to buddy up with the owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf later, the chef comes back to work to a pink slip. 27 out of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately after. Oh boy, I think I might have a winning story. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting. Her brother was in charge of the technical operations and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy, who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week, plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find that the office was locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner and his wife, had quit. He wouldn't say why, but he assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later, I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, and then the tech support guy grins and says, "So, do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" Me? "No, but I've certainly been curious." The owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry. Tech, he and his wife got excommunicated. Me, blank stare. Tech, didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses? Apparently everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife were swingers, and someone in the church found out. Plot twist. Listen, I don't think anyone should be excluded from a workplace for their private lifestyle choices if everyone was consenting adults and they weren't hurting anyone, but at least it makes for a good story. You remember Walden Books, the store in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed in the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked in retail before, you know that this is impossible. My friend argues with the DM, and the DM basically tells him that he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done, it will be done, or he'll turn the entire staff. Fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24/7, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag, and miracle upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit to working off the clock. When they get to my friend, she tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, "How else would we get this done with the deadline time allotted? You know what the store looked like before and you know how much time we had." The LP guys just looked at each other and then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend. Managers. What was the worst case of, "I demand to speak to the manager," that you've ever experienced? I told a customer buying makeup what products she should use on her deeper skin tone, and I'm now racist because I don't want her looking dead at the club. I worked in a high-end makeup store in Manhattan. We saw all kinds of people with all kinds of complexions and concerns, and you learned pretty fast what words work best to cushion the blow for some of the stuff. For example, texture instead of wrinkles, deeper or richer instead of darker. One thing that's always fun to have to explain is what flashback is. On deeper skin tones, a lot of setting powders will catch the light when a flash photo is taken. It'll basically make the person look like they have baby powder on their face, or make them look grey. It's super embarrassing and sort of immediately tells the world that you don't know how to use your makeup. Also, all your photos from your event or night out are ruined, so it's pretty sucky all around. Side note, I'm blonde and I use the Big C mixed with white out as a bronzer. I'm really white. For those of you confused, the Big C is an illegal substance that I can't use the real name of in this YouTube video. I was talking to a customer who had amazing, super deep skin. She was really cool and I was talking to her like a regular human being, and she was looking for a setting powder. Her friend was with her who likes honey beige, so pretty light. She was trying to get her to buy a translucent, which translates to white people and white people who are tan. When I asked her how she's going to use it, she had planned to bake, makeup baking, with it, and that cuts out like 80% of the setting powders we had. This was a couple of years ago, so we didn't have all that many medium-deep appropriate setting powders yet. I explained to her what flashback was, and I told her she could set her makeup with a powder foundation or either of those 2 setting powders. I told her that her friends might really like some of the other one and tell you to buy it, but with your beautiful skin, you kind of have to use different products. I then said that at some point the makeup industry will realize that there is an entire continent that also needs to set their makeup, but apparently we're not there yet. The customer laughed, she picked up one of the things I was showing her, and said, "Thank you," in the, "You're so kind, I'm so happy I found you today," kind of sing-song tone. Some other customer overheard some of this conversation and told my manager I was telling a customer that we didn't serve people like her. She was apparently yelling at my manager about how racist I was. I was so comfortable in this conversation with my equal that at some point I had said dark skin instead of deeper skin tones. This is apparently a huge insult to some people. It wasn't, however, to the woman living in her deeper skin tone skin looking for some damn setting powder. The woman who complained was a white lady. I was furious. Not only because this random woman overheard something that made me look racist, I was mad because I'm white and color theory and oxidation, a lot of deep shades that look great when you first swatch, but turn orange in an hour or so, for deeper skin tones is a lot more complicated, in my opinion, than for white folks. It took me years to understand the differences in tone and shade and how the products oxidize. It took me just as long to learn how to tell a black woman that 80% of what we sell here isn't going to work for you and have her leave happy, confident, and not disappointed. At Red Lobster, someone grabbed the manager and told him his shrimp was cold, wanted a free beer, and he could get better fish by fishing. This manager was my dad and was meeting us after work and apparently looked like an authority figure since he had a tie on. My dad replied, "That's cocktail shrimp, you moron." I recently had an experience where I was at a restaurant having a meeting for my volunteer work, and a guy mistook me for their waitress. I was walking back from the bathroom when he very obnoxiously huffed and yelled from a distance at me, "Excuse me, can we please get some more silverware?" I just stared at him for a good 10 seconds, dumbfounded because of his tone, before saying, "I don't work here." He immediately turned bright red and his demeanor went back to talking to me like a human. Maybe he had been waiting a long time for silverware, but I couldn't help but feel bad for his actual waitress. No idea why, I have a distinct look that didn't fit in with the waiters or waitresses, and I was wearing a t-shirt with my alma mater on it, while the servers were in black button-ups. Worked for a passenger railroad in Cincinnati, 23, male, wear reflective high-vis shirt and pants. We have to run ahead of our dinner train and flag each crossing, stopping traffic due to a ridiculous rule set by the railroad we run on. Mind you, we go 7 to 10 miles per hour, fairly easy to keep up with. Saturday, I drive up to a crossing with the lights flashing already and start flagging cars across since the train is at least 1 minute away. Middle-aged man drives up to me, stops before the crossing. I wave harder at him to come through. He speeds up beside me and stops on the crossing. "I don't know you're with the railroad. You could just be some yahoo." "What?" "Okay, sir, continue on. The train is right there." "Why should I listen to some young kid like you?" "Because if you don't, you're getting hit by the freaking train. Now move." "I'll be speaking with your manager." As he drives off, I get teed off and throw a flag on the ground. An hour later, I'm back as the train goes the other way. My general manager, 23, male, 6 foot tall, is standing with me helping protect the crossing. Man returns, yells at him, "Who's your manager? I'd like to report him for being a butthole." Boss looks at me, turns to him and says, "I am. Now get the frick off my railroad." Guy gently drives away. In conclusion, older man stops on railroad tracks, is butthole, manager is the bigger, better butthole. As a mild-mannered Northern European, I've always been thankful for when I've had a bigger, meaner person on my side at the workplace whenever I've been browbeaten by a customer. I work in the admissions department at a zoo. We work closely with the membership department and are really friendly with each other. When people purchase membership, they get a card that says their name, how many adults, how many children, if they're allowed to bring in a guest, etc. The card says clearly that you must show ID per card. Sometimes we're friendly or lazy and ask for one ID for the whole group. Well, a week ago, some guy didn't have his ID. I don't know how he drove to the zoo since you need a form of ID to drive, and we told him that without an ID, we can't let him in. The guy got mad and started screaming at us, saying random crap to us. He demanded to see a manager. Good thing our manager, for admission not membership, was on site. She explained to the guy that without ID, we can't let him go in, showed him on the card where it explains to show ID. The guy screams at her and says that because he paid for the membership, he should be allowed to go in without an ID. My manager responded, "No ID, no entry." He asked to see a manager. Her response was, "I am the manager." He then asks if there was someone higher up that he could speak to. She told him, "If you want to do anything, you'll have to speak with membership." So he goes to membership and they told us he was being a butthole and screaming that he paid for it and blah blah blah. The manager for membership was called and because he screamed at him, they denied his entry to the zoo. I worked at an independent chocolate shop that sold various flavors of truffles, brownies, and drinks. We had non-dairy options, vegan options, and nut-free options. A woman demanded to speak with the manager because we did not have any dairy-free, nut-free, sugar-free vegan options. Luckily, the owner literally just laughed and said, "We do have one. It's called water." I have never seen such entitled rage. If said shop happened to be in a weird yuppie or foodie type of area, I bet they could make carob goods for nut jobs like this woman. Fake chocolate with fake sugar and charge considerably more than normal for it because it's specialty. Even if they tasted freaking horrible, fad dieters would buy them up in a heartbeat. What in Thor's name does that girl eat if she can't eat dairy, nuts, sugar, and has to keep vegan? I worked the customer service desk at a grocery store. One afternoon, a guy came storming over after getting checked out and threw a package of beef in front of me. He starts going off, yelling and cussing at me because he was supposed to get a $3.54 discount, but the register only took off $3.53. He was screaming at me that he wanted his penny back and that it wasn't even about the penny, but the principle of the thing. By the time he was through, he had yelled at me, my customer service manager, and our store manager on duty. As soon as I gave him that penny, though, he shut right up and left. Principle of the thing, I guess. I was a shift lead at a GameStop and was the manager on duty with one other associate in the store. We were pretty busy, both the other employee and I were on registers, ringing through our respective lines. Poor guy I work with gets this soccer mum haircut that I knew was going to be trouble, and she's trying to return a new game that had the seal broken on it. Against return policy, can't help you. So lady then gets really upset and demands to cancel all of her son's pre-orders. My guy obliges and is preparing to give her refund and store credit because her son had only paid for the pre-orders with trades. You can't match tenders, so my guy informed her so. That was just it. She was instantly screaming and calling my associate a liar. He literally turns the computer screen towards her and shows her the entries in trade credit, but she isn't having it. "Let me speak to your manager." Dude points to me, I wrap up with my customer, and we trade registers so he can keep helping out. I ask her how I can help, to which she screams her experience at me. I reiterate what my buddy informed her, and that there isn't any way that we can get her cash back. She claims, "Well, I'm gonna call your corporate office and tell them that your policy doesn't apply to me. I've never been treated like this before." To which I happily offer her the corporate number and advise her that telling a corporate customer service line that they believe they are exempt from policy is probably not the best strategy. Woman gets red in the face and starts looking around the store, and God forbid the poor man, the old manager, walks in. He does not work there anymore, but the woman recognizes him from his time at the store. She begins to accuse me of lying to her because she knows that he is the real manager and that he can be of help to her. Nope, dude is just trying to stop. She ended up just leaving in a huff. There is a fairly well-used GIF of Homer Simpson shrinking into a hedge. I choose to believe that the old manager did this into the shelves of GameStop when he heard the conversation. Yikes. Worked front desk of a hotel. Had a woman throw a gosh darn tantrum because the state we were in charged a 6% room tax. She demanded that I remove the tax. I told her that we had no control over taxes. She still wouldn't accept the reality of taxes, so I printed off the contact information on her state representative and told her to direct her complaints to them. She did not like that at all. She started screaming, so I got my manager. My manager said basically what I said, that we cannot legally remove a tax. So the woman grabbed the bowl of mints from the counter and threw it at my head and stormed out. We had her credit card on file and charged her for the full amount. I had a regular repeat guest get upset because the room she normally stayed in was booked prior to her check-in and wouldn't be free for a few days. I apologized and promised her the room once it opened up. She got really angry and started demanding that I make the guest that had been in the room for a few days move because that room was her room. I continued apologizing and telling her that she'd get it in a few days. She asked to speak to my manager and yelled at my manager that just because I was pretty didn't mean that I knew what I was talking about and I should be let go. My manager ended up giving the guest the same information I had given her and telling the guest that I wouldn't be fired as I had excellent customer service skills. Weirdest complaint, insult, compliment ever. I had a woman call in to tell me that she had spent too little on an ice cream cone. We had a special that was like 2 scoops in a waffle cone for $5, and for some reason she only got 1 scoop and said she didn't know about the special, despite there being signs all over the shop about it. She claimed that my worker didn't offer it to her. I didn't focus on upselling at the store, so this wasn't a big deal to me. I apologized to her, but was also like, what exactly do you want me to do about it? This happened yesterday. I'm assuming you ate the ice cream, so you can't return it. She wanted a refund anyway for the inconvenience. I asked if she had a receipt. She said she didn't. I said, no go without a receipt. She said she didn't get one at checkout. I explained to her that in my state we're not required by law to give a receipt for cash purchased food service items. So if she didn't ask for one, tough. She kept pressing, saying she demanded to speak to the manager. I explained I was the manager. She then asked if there was another manager she could speak to. I told her no. I was end of the line, top of the heap. No one else was going to tell her anything different. She huffed and told me she would be by to discuss it in person. She never came in. These stories are giving me flashbacks of all the times people asked for the corporate number, because that happens to me all the time at the car wash I used to run. I was it. Top of the line. The owners cared about the company, but didn't give a rat's butt about customer complaints. They were told to never give out information about them. Not numbers, not names, not any other businesses they owned, nothing. So when you got some B-word yelling and screaming at you because you're following company policy to not rewash a $3 car wash, and she wants corporate's number, you get to tell her that you are as high as it goes, there is no corporate. Well, do you own it then? And I couldn't lie. Nope, I'd tell her. Then get me the owner's number. They'd always act so smug, like they said the magic words to open a secret cave door. Sorry, but they prefer to remain private. They've trusted me to run this location, to do the hiring and firing, to process the payroll, to order parts and supplies, to deal with the insurance company, to repair broken equipment, and to deal with any and all customer issues and complaints. It'd either end here with them insisting that they would find the owner's information and have me fired because I followed the owner's instructions, or they'd yell and I would call the cops. Sorry, I'm having flashbacks. God, that was an awful time. Obligatory not a manager but. Maybe not the worst, but this was definitely the dumbest I've ever seen. A sign was accidentally left up from earlier in the week advertising men's Levi's as buy one, get one half off. So for 2 pairs it would be roughly $90. The current sale was to get 2 pairs for $70. Had a lady pitch an absolute fit that they weren't ringing up to buy one, get one half off, she was being ripped off, etc. Tried and tried to explain to her that we had accidentally missed a sign, but she was actually getting a better deal at the current price. She wouldn't have any of it and demanded to speak to the manager. Store leader comes out and tells her the exact same thing, but the lady will not listen and is adamant about getting them at the price on the sign. Store leader finally gives up and tells me to just go ahead and do a price override and charge her the extra money. Lady leaves smugly, like she thinks she's just worked us over big time, and makes some kind of comment about how I need to learn to listen to customers on the way out. In conclusion, the lady spent an extra $20 on jeans because she wanted them for the price on an old sign. There's a saying from somewhere that I remember in this instance: people would rather be right than be happy. I guess the victory of this situation gave this person the satisfaction she was missing from her bland and terrible life. When I worked at Starbucks, we, as you can imagine, had plenty of crappy entitled people come in expecting the world of employees, barely paid above minimum wage, who've been awake since 3 a.m. or earlier. We had people blaming us for the fact that they were late for work and were going to be fired. People blaming us for being late picking up their kids blaming us for being late to school. Plenty of, but I ordered a venti, why did you give me a grande? Or, this coffee is cold because I've left it sitting out for an hour, but I want you to make me a new one for free. Or, you aren't being enthusiastic enough after 8 hours of being here and so sleep deprived you don't know what your name is. But the worst/funniest was Libby. Libby was a regular who we really wished wasn't. She was overly demanding and had one of those super complicated half-calf, double soy, triple whip, hold the cream, half the sugar, do a backflip when you serve me types. And she could tell if you got her order wrong and would make you remake it until it was right. She would also steal from our tip jar right in front of our faces. She'd pretend to put a 5 in and then pull out 4 ones, but she'd take out 5 or 6 ones instead. And one time during this little switcheroo of hers, she accidentally dropped a $100 bill out of her wallet. The good thing about Libby was that she only came in once or twice a week, but that meant that we were the ones who had to find this $100 bill for her. She didn't notice it for a few hours afterwards, and when she did, she called in and asked for the manager, and asked her if she had seen it. Since she would have dropped it out in the lobby, where we very rarely went since we were so busy in BOH, we went out to check but found nothing and told her that a customer must have taken it, and that we were sorry, but there was nothing she could do. She flipped her crap. That's my rent money. I'm going to be kicked out of my house. Do you want me to be homeless? You hate me and want me to be homeless, you crappy effers? I hate you, and you're terrible. Go frick off and die. The supervisor came out and gave me the gist of what she'd said while begging me to find this money. There were also some racist accusations since the neighborhood of this Starbucks was predominantly immigrants, and Libby was your standard white liberal until put under pressure. Anyway, so a week passes and still the money hasn't shown up. Libby calls us each day, multiple times a day, to find out if we found her money. Sometimes she yells and screams, sometimes she doesn't. Either way, the answer's always the same: we haven't found her money. So she comes in again and pretends like she hasn't been cussing us out for a week straight. is all happy and bubbly and jokes about losing the money and how she's just so scatterbrained sometimes, haha. She tries to talk me into giving her a free coffee since we lost her money, but I tell her that she has to pay anyway. She grumbles and opens up her wallet, pulls out her card, and out flutters a $100 bill and lands on the counter. We both look at it. She looks into her wallet and after a moment goes, "Oh, that's right. I hid $100 in my credit card slot for safekeeping so I wouldn't lose it. You can stop looking for my money now." That was it. No apologies for the abuse throughout the week, the accusations, anything. I know I shouldn't expect one, but darn, I think she realized that she fricked up though, because she didn't show back up for a couple of weeks. In conclusion, she thought we stole her money after she stole our money, later found her money in her wallet safe and sound. I was busy at Christmas at an old job sorting out wrapping paper, etc. The queue got large, so I jumped on the till. A customer approached and complained about having to pay 5 pence for a plastic bag. The charge just started. She said she wasn't going to pay, so I charged her and asked for the next customer. She moaned that she wouldn't be able to carry everything. I asked for 5 pence. She asked to speak to my supervisor. I said I'll go get him. I left the tills, turned a corner, waited a few seconds, and reappeared, informing her that I was in charge. I once had a customer buy $80 worth of cheap black t-shirts, then complain about the 10-cent per bag charge. What a ripoff! This is ridiculous! Okay, have fun carrying a stack of shirts to your car, you penny-pinching jackass. I was the VP of sales for an F500 here in the States. At about 6:30 p.m., my office phone rang and it was a person from HR asking if I could take a call in which the client was irate and threatening legal action. I get on the phone and quickly realize there is zero chance of making this man happy. And ironically, I'm a big fan of firing crappy clients. The things he was demanding was simply ridiculous, and I politely refused. I also stated that I would personally allow his company out from its contract with no fees or costs. Of course, still not good enough, I eventually hung up due to the screaming and foul language. Long story short, I found out the next day he was arrested for trespassing that evening, while trying to enter our corporate suburban office with 2 guns. But the joke was on him because I worked in our corporate downtown office. I used to work at the concession stand/cafe at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. We had snacks like potato chips and candy, as well as pre-made sandwiches from a local sandwich shop. We only got a certain number of sandwiches for each day, so when we ran out, that was it. This one lady, who was in a wheelchair, came through my line telling me how she was diabetic and needed to eat a meal. I showed her that we had trail mix, candy, and chips, but she absolutely could not eat any of that because she was diabetic. It had to be a sandwich and nothing else. I told her we literally didn't have any sandwiches left, but she just kept repeating about how she was diabetic, and she told me there would be sandwiches. She was being incredibly rude to me, making a scene, and said, "I was told there would be sandwiches," probably about 10 times. By this point, there was a long line forming behind her while she was making a scene. She asked for the manager, so I told her she could step out of line and wait for the manager, but she wouldn't budge. The manager came over and told her the exact thing that I had. She eventually calmed down, moved out of the line, and agreed to have chips and candy. For free. I don't know who the frick told her about the sandwiches, but I want to slap them. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.